A 10-year-old girl is forced into marriage and immediately pressured to have children. WTF laughing face? Two minors are locked in their wedding room. For Alyssa, the female protagonist, it's a terrifying first. 7 years earlier, a woman was in a car accident and her soul transmigrated into this fictional world, becoming a minor character. Alyssa is also the mother of the villainous secondary character. In her childhood, the original owner of this body lost her parents early on. Growing up in the uncaring Duke's household, she became extremely clingy to her husband due to a severe lack of affection. Perhaps because she was so bothersome, she was ultimately killed by her husband. Alyssa doesn't want to die tragically. She has 10 years left before her demise. She just needs to change her fate before then. During her first meeting with the Duke, he immediately proposes she become his daughter-in-law. He constantly belittles her and looks down on women. Don't men have it easier than women? They carouse under the guise of work, then come home and yell. And in the end, they take all the credit. As she fumes silently, the Duke points to a contract on the table. Sign here. Looking at the marriage contract, Alyssa doesn't hesitate. She picks up the pen and signs. As long as she doesn't have children and doesn't cling to her villainous husband, her survival is assured. She can live comfortably in the Duke's mansion and receive a large settlement upon divorce. It's such a good deal, only a fool would refuse. Filled with motivation, she looks around her luxurious room, her jaw dropping in amazement. Ornate decorations, a closet full of haute couture gowns. This is the life of a noblewoman. She lies on the bed, overjoyed, but the thought of her unseen husband keeps her awake. As Napat's father, her husband, Lihart, only exists in memories. Although Alyssa has read the novel thoroughly, she doesn't know his personality. She only knows from Napat's memories that he's a terrifying person. Silently praying he never returns, she finally succumbs to exhaustion and falls asleep. Suddenly, she's awakened by the sound of the door opening. Rubbing her eyes, she looks over. A dark-haired young man is walking towards her, his fierce appearance clearly indicating trouble. He startles her so much that she clutches the blanket, trembling, taking in his appearance. The young man looks disgusted. She's so small, I almost didn't see her. He turns to leave, but the door is locked, the speed making him question reality. He curses and bangs on the door. Alyssa is terrified, but she also realizes that this child is her husband, Lihart. A sudden gust of wind blows. Watching the whirlwind surrounding the young man, she understands. This is the power of Lublin, the ability to control wind. Only those with Lublin blood can inherit it. Lihart is now in a rage, gnashing his teeth and threatening whoever locked the door. But his bluster is just that. He turns, his eyes red with fury, and glares at Alyssa. Seeing the boy's enraged red eyes, she dives under the covers. Thinking she's about to die, she's surprised when he lies down quietly on the sofa. Though terrified, she still tries to greet him. She introduces herself nervously, but he completely ignores her. She can only sulk. While she doesn't understand his behavior, one thing is certain, he's very rude. Sure enough, the next morning, her young husband ignores her again. Traditionally, on the first day of marriage, newlyweds greet their elders and have breakfast together. But Lihart leaves her alone early in the morning and goes directly to the Duke, causing a scene and demanding an annulment, which is destined to fail. In the Duke's eyes, he was nothing more than a tool to produce an heir. If he didn't fulfill his obligations as the heir, he wasn't qualified to be the young Duke. The implied threat was clear. Not only did he fail to annul the marriage, but he was also lectured by the Duke in front of Alyssa for not having breakfast with his young wife. The Duke insisted they share a room. Lihart glared and reiterated his absolute refusal. How resolute he is now, how much he'll regret it later. The Duke stormed off, leaving Alyssa alone once more. The reason the Duke summoned him was to give him something, a thick book titled A Wife's Virtues. It looked utterly dull. After politely bidding the Duke farewell, Lihart felt utterly hopeless. He actually had to study this drivel. What a miserable fate. But this was just the beginning. That evening, he was forced to drink husband water against his will. Even if he didn't want to, he had no choice. He watched as Alyssa cautiously peeked in from the doorway. To his surprise, Lihart was there too, looking at his feet propped up on the sofa. A mischievous smile crept onto Alyssa's face. Judging from the conversation between the grandfather and grandson earlier, the Duke only saw his grandson as a means to continue the family line, and this tool kept rebelling. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Alyssa slowly approached, calling him young Duke with a bright smile, extending an invitation to friendship that seemed impossible to refuse. But some people just don't get it. He complained she was too noisy. Alyssa wanted to jump up and slap the rude boy, but she could only fume and bid him good night. After all, he was her meal ticket. But she wouldn't give up. For the sake of her divorce plan, she had to win over her husband. From that day on, besides her daily lessons on bridal etiquette and the qualities of a duchess, She also had to endure Lihart's tedious, repetitive behavior. But their relationship hadn't progressed at all. Her husband continued to keep his distance, waging a protracted war with the sofa. This couldn't go on. Alyssa sighed. Come sleep in the bed with me. I won't bite. Lihart stared, wide-eyed. Before she could finish her touching words, or he could react to her surprise offer, he quickly extended his small hand. Come on, I'll just hold your hand while we sleep. Alyssa, in an attempt to bridge the gap between them, resorted to this childish lie. Unexpectedly, her young husband was even more disgusted. Whether it was her direct pleas or her sincere concern during the day, Lihart saw it all as manipulation, even going so far as to call her the Duke's lackey. She tried to explain, but he simply wouldn't believe her. She knew he had a bad relationship with his grandfather, but she didn't realize it was this bad. Not long ago, she had become a homeless orphan, and the Duke had taken her in as his granddaughter-in-law. She hadn't expected her explanation to only reinforce Lihart's suspicions, because the first thing someone who's done something wrong does is bring up their family history. Alyssa was dumbfounded. Had this child been lied to his entire life? She had only agreed to the marriage so that she, an orphan, could have a better life. This child was impossible to reason with, insisting she was the Duke's pawn. Communication was futile. Since gentle persuasion wasn't working, she would use facts. She remembered from the original novel. At the founding of the empire, there were 4 families, each with the ability to control wind, fire, water, and earth. They deliberated over who would become emperor. The heads of the Lublin and Kaler families, who controlled wind and fire respectively, both desired the throne. The Kaler head succeeded. To prevent tyranny, the Lublin family was to act as a check on the imperial family. But as time passed, the oath was forgotten. The increasingly powerful imperial family sought to absorb the Lublin family's power. The encampment became the perfect excuse. If Lihart didn't want to marry the princess, someone had to fill the spot beside him. Alyssa thought to herself, hand on heart. He didn't want children or the position of Duchess. Once he came of age, he would leave. But before leaving, he needed his wife to play along. Lihart initially thought his little wife was naive, but it turned out she knew quite a bit. While agreeing to the deal, she didn't forget to emphasize her promise to leave. He thought, just wait for that haughty attitude to backfire. Unexpectedly, in the middle of the night, the blanket behind him became soft and fluffy. At first, it was quite enjoyable. But he quickly realized something was wrong. He suddenly opened his eyes. He was being completely hugged by his wife. He was startled like a little wildcat. Didn't she say they would just hold hands? Now she's clinging to him, haha. It didn't matter that the pillow fell on the floor. What mattered was that he had been pushed to the very edge of the bed. He was so angry he wanted to explode, but a sudden chill left him with nowhere to vent his frustration. He reached out a hand and gently pulled the blanket over his wife. What a nuisance. After successfully coaxing and cuddling, she acted sweetly and made a request to the Duke. She not only satisfied her desire to take finance lessons, but also took the opportunity to reprimand the maids in the mansion. It turned out that Alyssa woke up in the morning and was reading when she was attracted by the commotion outside. A child no older than 5 was either mopping the floor or running around serving tea and water early in the morning. Now, the child was even cleaning a lampstand that was out of reach, looking wobbly and as if they might fall at any moment. A little kid doing the work of 5 people. Wasn't it obvious they were being bullied by the adults? Alyssa walked over with a smile and confirmed her suspicions. She immediately became furious. It's you who should be working. You're ganging up and bullying a child just so you can go out and play. After comforting the little maid, a smile crept across her lips. She was determined to handle this. Arriving at the Duke's office, she politely curtsied. She got straight to the point and asked for a favor. She wanted a new personal maid because her current one couldn't do anything but make the bed. After successfully prompting the Duke to lecture the maids, she feigned innocence. She recounted everything she had seen and heard. The Duke, of course, saw through Alyssa's little scheme, but he still ordered someone to investigate the matter. After all, without a clear alternative, he wouldn't easily give up this card. Alyssa seized on this point. She successfully got rid of the lazy maids. From then on, she endlessly exploited the Duke's reluctance to replace her to satisfy her own little whims. As long as it wasn't a major issue, it wasn't a problem. However, the Duke remained opposed to the idea of her learning about finances. She had to resort to her trump card. She expressed her desire to take advantage of the time spent in class with her husband to improve their relationship. How could the Duke, eager for a grandchild, refuse? Alyssa was full of confidence. She was going to try every possible way to make money. She pushed open the classroom door with enthusiasm. Lihart looked at her with disdain. What are you doing here? Although he said he was pleased to hear that his little wife wanted to help him with his work, his face was full of contempt. A cough came from behind them. The white-bearded teacher had arrived. After only a few minutes of lecturing, he gave Alyssa a small classroom task. try to use the abacus to calculate a few numbers. She could manage simple 2-digit numbers, but she clearly struggled with more complex 3-digit numbers. After all, a Chinese abacus wasn't something one could master in just a couple of lessons. Fortunately, her villainous husband suddenly became helpful, patiently teaching her the correct method step by step. The teacher applauded their interaction, watching his little wife quietly whisper thank you, Lihart, who had initially been indifferent, couldn't help but react to her adorable smile. It struck a chord in his soul, while simultaneously charming his heart. It was only when his little wife reminded him that he realized his hand was still touching her. Immediately, he reacted like a startled kitten, his face flushing crimson. He kept telling himself this wasn't helping her, just reviewing his lessons. But as soon as the words left his mouth, he contradicted himself. His eyes couldn't help but dart towards her repeatedly. Now that the lesson was over, he pretended not to know her. Young Sif enthusiastically invited him to play, kindly offering to buy him some mouth-watering cookies. Not only did he refuse the offer, but he also mocked them as something only children would like, making Sif's face turn red with anger. He returned to his room and picked up a book, but the sound of thunder and lightning outside disturbed his concentration. Thinking about the monsters that frequently appeared in spring, continuing to read was impossible. What a nuisance, he muttered, his words sharp, but his hand still reached for his cloak. Stepping onto the windowsill, he transformed into a bat-like figure and soared into the wind. Meanwhile, the young Sif he was worried about was chatting and laughing with his personal maid, Annie. Alyssa was overjoyed to have finally bought the cookies she'd been craving. She dreamt of opening a bakery after her divorce. But before her dream could come true, disaster struck. With a loud crash, the carriage began to shake violently. Both mistress and maid were thrown as the carriage overturned. Cookies and pastries scattered across the carriage. Before she could even cry, the presence of death approached again. A hideous monster clung to the carriage window, pounding on the glass. The mistress and maid huddled together in terror, thinking this was the end. Fortunately, Lihart arrived just in time. Facing the ferocious monster, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Manipulating the thunder and rain, he formed a swirling vortex of energy. With a single, stylish move, he crushed the monster. In an instant, the air filled with a delicious aroma, making even the children next door cry with envy. Watching his wife comfort the young maid, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Her arm was clearly injured. Was he blind? You'd think he'd changed, but when he heard his wife say she wanted to repay him, he couldn't resist his sharp tongue. He scoffed. How are you going to repay me, little cookie eater? As they say, the more arrogant one is, the quicker the comeuppance. The very night of the monster attack, an invitation arrived from the emperor. Ostensibly, it was an invitation for the duke and his family to attend a hunting event. In reality, it was a chance to assess the girl who had taken the princess's place. And perhaps, to see if she could be eliminated. Everyone knew the true intention, but the prideful duke accepted nonetheless. After half a month of arduous travel, they finally arrived at the imperial capital. The young couple immediately began their preparations. After all, they couldn't afford to be outdone in such a setting. They dressed Alyssa like a doll in a shop window, exquisite, beautiful, and undeniably charming. It was the first time she had seen her husband looking so handsome. She showered him with silent compliments. Even though her husband clearly saw her, he turned away, pretending not to recognize her. Preoccupied with criticizing his rudeness, she failed to notice his reddening ears. What made it even more exasperating was that Lihart stared at her throughout the carriage ride, as if mesmerized. Are you staring at me because I have something on me? She teased, seizing the opportunity to flirt. Unexpectedly, her words proved prophetic. There was indeed something on her. Seeing her husband remove a loose thread from her hair, she was mortified. Quickly changing the subject, she asked about the princess and the crown prince. At the mention of those two, Lihart held nothing back. Scum and irredeemable trash, he declared. Holding onto her husband's offered arm, Alyssa stepped out of the carriage, feeling apprehensive. Just how awful could these two be to make her already sharp-tongued husband even more so? But as she looked up, she met the blatant stares of the nobles and began to understand. Because she was a young bride from the south, she was mocked as a country bumpkin. Casually assigned a lower seat at the table, Alyssa desperately wanted to punch the offender. But as the Duchess, even at the age of 10, she had to learn to endure. Fortunately, she had a decent husband, usually so arrogant. He knew how to be fiercely protective of his wife. He sat down next to her without a word and faced the crown prince's provocative questions. Her young husband retorted coldly. His wife's side was where he belonged. Even if he was mocked as a lovesick fool, he didn't care. As soon as the group of children sat down, someone couldn't resist starting a performance, pouring a full glass of 82 red wine. The crown prince came to the end of the table, swirling the wine glass in his hand. He gave the silver-haired boy a free hair wash, causing everyone to burst into laughter. Alyssa was furious. When she first entered, she saw the crown prince and princess bullying someone, and now they wouldn't even stop during dinner. It turned out her husband was right about them being scum. Without hesitation, she grabbed a handkerchief and helped the boy, but her action was bound to upset certain people. The crown prince praised her kindness, then picked up the overflowing wine glass, saying he wanted to properly welcome his new friend. Just as the wine was about to spill, a sudden gust of wind flipped the princess's head. Everyone present was momentarily blinded. When the wind died down, the crown prince was drenched in his own wine. He flew into a rage, yelling at Lihart like a rabid dog. If he hadn't been held back, who knows how badly he would have been beaten. He even continued to hurl threats as he retreated. Couldn't he just leave quietly? Alyssa complained inwardly, watching her husband get up and leave. She happily followed him, wanting to thank him for his help. He denied doing anything, but she still wanted to say thank you, my husband. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, Lihart froze, then turned and left without a word. She thought she was being too bothersome, but didn't see the blush creeping up his neck. Using her soiled dress as an excuse, she declined the tea party and stayed in the grove with her maid, Annie. There, they stumbled upon a dangerous conspiracy. Several suspicious men were loudly plotting to eliminate the young Duke Lubin. Hearing that her husband was in danger, she almost sought help from the royal knights. However, she couldn't rule out the possibility that those men were acting on the emperor's orders. After careful consideration, she decided to seek help from her own family's knights. She ran all the way, arriving breathless and sweating. Unexpectedly, the knights treated her information as a joke. Seeing their dismissive attitude, she directly brought up her powerful backing, the Duke. If something happened to the Duke's only heir, did they think they would be spared? You have no obligation to be loyal to me, but you swore allegiance to Lubin. After saying this, Alyssa grabbed the reins and, without a second thought, rode alone into the forest. Although she knew her husband wouldn't die, she was still worried. She had transmigrated and replaced the original owner of this body, so the plot might change. So, no matter what, she had to see for herself. Suddenly, a fierce wind arose ahead, much stronger than usual. She knew something must have happened to Lihart. Other children at 10 were still playing in the mud, but she was already married. Seeing her husband's life in danger, she immediately rode with the knights to his rescue. She witnessed her husband single-handedly defeat dozens of men. The assassins were crushed like ants. The other children present were terrified, but Alyssa was filled with worry. She was the first to rush to him after the fight, seeing the blood seeping from his side. She quickly reached out to support him and brought him home to care for him. Although her husband's injuries weren't serious, she unexpectedly received bad news. Annie, the maid, stammered nervously, for she had overheard the truth. The mastermind behind the assassination attempt was actually the Duke, Lihart's own grandfather. Alyssa couldn't fathom how a grandfather could harm his own grandson. Recalling the nobles who had come and gone from the Duke's mansion that day, she wondered if it was all a ploy to use his grandson to prove Lubin's continued power. The thought made her tremble with anger. It explained why the Duke had merely glanced indifferently at his injured, unconscious grandson before leaving. Although she swore Annie to secrecy, Alyssa was deeply conflicted. If Lihart learned the truth and left the Duke's mansion, her comfortable life would be over. But she couldn't simply enjoy her life while ignoring another's suffering. So, when Lihart awoke, she told him the truth. Unexpectedly, Lihart remained remarkably calm, as if he were already accustomed to such things. It turned out this wasn't the first time. Born a bastard, he had always been considered a disgrace to the family by the Duke. If it weren't for his quick wit, he would have died countless times already. He only became the heir because of a carriage accident a year ago that had taken the Duke's only legitimate son and daughter-in-law. He had been brought back then, treated as nothing more than a breeding tool. He wanted revenge. He wanted to personally ensure the end of this family line. Learning of her husband's painful past, Alyssa was both shocked and heartbroken. To think he had endured so much pain. She suddenly understood the original Alyssa's death in the novel. After being manipulated into having a child, Lihart would have been understandably devastated. She took her husband's hand. "I'm on your side," she said, always. Like a warm sun, she warmed the broken heart of the tragic young man. Lihart was instantly captivated. But their private moment was soon interrupted by an unexpected guest, the boy they had helped at the banquet. Anselm saw his young wife dressed so beautifully, smiling so happily. She had just vowed to be on his side, yet here she was meeting with another man alone, leaving him, a wounded patient, in bed. He was so angry his wound stopped hurting, and he could walk without a problem. He stormed over to his wife and spoke to the guest with undisguised hostility. Noticing his wife's glare, he feigned dizziness. Alyssa had no choice but to give in and personally escort him back to his room. His jealous act was almost comical. But the guest was prepared. He quickly presented his invitation, hoping to see Alyssa at the banquet. Lihart's lips nearly disappeared into his hairline with annoyance. Before going to sleep that night, he subtly hinted that his wife should keep her distance from the boy. His inexplicable dislike, however, earned him a lecture from Alyssa. She even brought up that scumbag, the crown prince. Feeling the implied insult, he became agitated. You said you were on my side. Seeing his wife feigning ignorance, he was speechless. It was as if she was asking, how could you be like this? He buried his face in the blankets, ignoring even her good night. But later, in the quiet of the night, he poked her cheek. You should only care about me, he mumbled. His possessiveness was unmatched. Yet, the next day, he resumed his aloof demeanor, sitting silently in the carriage. Alyssa was puzzled. After his display of displeasure last night, she hadn't expected him to come. It must have been shyness. The thought made him seem rather endearing. And today, her husband was acting differently. As he stepped out of the carriage, he offered his hand to her. The man who usually scowled at her was now being so considerate. Although it felt unusual, it also felt reassuring and sweet. As the three of them entered, they immediately drew admiring glances and compliments. It was a stark contrast to the previous royal banquet. But Alyssa couldn't bring herself to enjoy this warm reception. It was the result of the Duke's scheme against his own grandson. After greeting the Earl, the couple were escorted to a separate area. It's the gathering place for the children during the banquet. But other than the little host, Ansel, it seems no one welcomed them. After all, they had greatly offended the crown prince. But the tables were full of cookies, so who cared about the others? Just as Alyssa finished greeting Ansel, her husband started being sarcastic again. Alyssa shoved a pastry into his mouth, complaining that he was particularly talkative today. He took a refreshing bite, saying it must be delicious. While eating, he didn't forget to tease her. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her foot. Her heel was rubbed raw and swollen by her new shoes. Beauty truly comes at a price, she thought. Leaving her husband, she went to the balcony sofa alone. Only then did she feel like she could breathe again. She unintentionally overheard a conversation. News of the crown prince's serious illness came from the hallway. They said he was badly frightened. Alyssa didn't believe it. The crown prince wouldn't meet his end so soon. He was probably faking it. After all, he had been quite embarrassed in the forest that day. Unexpectedly, while gossiping, the topic turned to her own husband. She heard that Lihart's mother was a barmaid. They said he was a bastard and had been a mercenary. That's why he was so violent and unreasonable, they claimed. Alyssa trembled with anger. She stormed into the hallway to confront them. Facing their barrage of gossip, she wasn't intimidated at all. Compared to these rotten people who only dared to gossip behind others' backs, her husband was infinitely better. Seeing the pink-haired girl about to lose the argument, an arrogant silver-haired girl joined in. How dare you? She exclaimed. This is the crown prince's fiancée. The pink-haired girl then demanded Alyssa bow to her. It seems your upbringing was wasted on you. I am the Duchess. Do I need to bow to someone who is nothing? Each word hit its mark, making the silver-haired girl flush with anger. Alyssa continued to scold them as she left. She didn't expect her husband to follow her. Seeing his trembling hands, she immediately felt Shintung. Her gaze darkened. There was no need to deal with these pests. I don't need you to answer them. Even the hardest rock can be pierced by dripping water, let alone a person's heart. Since she had decided to stand by her husband's side, she couldn't let others slander him like this. On the contrary, when encountering people who spoke ill of him, her husband should blow them away like a storm. Lihart suddenly understood. Even if she was scared and trembling, she still fought for him. So that's what she meant. Remembering his wife's limping foot, he immediately squatted down. Alyssa was surprised by her husband's unexpected action. Although it felt a little awkward, it was warmer than she imagined. A group of shirtless, sweaty men caught the young Duchess's eye, making her practically drool. Her eyes were glued to them. Suddenly, her husband appeared behind her. Alyssa's guilty conscience nearly made her soul leave her body. Facing her husband's questioning gaze, she nervously laughed and praised the knights for being handsome. She was so captivated that she even wanted to learn swordsmanship, she claimed. In reality, she mainly wanted to train with the muscular men. Unexpectedly, he took her casual remark seriously and even volunteered to teach her personally. She had to give him a mental thumbs up. You're so great, she thought. But now things had gotten out of hand. She really wasn't interested in learning swordsmanship. She quickly made a few polite excuses and fled the scene. Watching her leave, Lihart's competitive spirit flared. So it's about handsomeness, is it? He thought. The next day, the handsome, unlucky victim appeared. Thompson, who had been working diligently at the Duke's mansion for a year, had a decent life. But he didn't know where he had offended the Duke. Last night, in the dead of night, the Duke suddenly sought him out, saying he wanted to spar with him today. Lihart stared at the upstairs window for 2 hours. This wasn't sparring at all. He only understood the true meaning of the sparring when that figure appeared. He hooked his finger. immediately grabbed his sword and charged forward. With a few swift and stylish moves, he knocked his opponent to the ground. Wouldn't this impress his wife? But when he turned to look at the upstairs window, the figure was gone. That evening, after washing up, he hesitantly asked his wife what she had been doing. Hearing that she had watched his sparring, he was overjoyed but pretended not to know. However, his charade lasted less than 3 seconds before his wife pulled him inside, breaking his composure. She looked him over, worried that the sparring might have aggravated his injuries from the past 2 days. As she spoke, she started to pull up his clothes. He broke out in a cold sweat and quickly changed the subject to the map on the side. Alyssa studied the different territories on the map, occasionally asking for his opinion on the best places to live. He was curious why she was asking, but the answer stunned him. She was planning where to live after their divorce. He remembered their agreement from a while ago and recalled his arrogance at the time. Filled with regret, he quickly inquired where she wanted to live. To his dismay, the place she mentioned was very close to Anserga. How infuriating. After that day, the Duke's mansion was peaceful for a while, but at the end of spring, news of war arrived. During times like these, the Crown Prince and other imperial princes were required to go to war to boost the morale of the soldiers. Unexpectedly, not only did the Crown Prince feign illness, but the Emperor also invoked a treaty and ordered Lihart to go to war in the Crown Prince's place. Seeing the Duke's anger, Alyssa was extremely worried. Although she knew her husband wouldn't die on the battlefield, the incident at the hunting grounds was still fresh in her mind. And in this household, she was the only one on her husband's side. My husband is strong, she told herself, her eyes inexplicably welling up. But the moment she saw her husband, tears streamed down her face. He might not die, but that didn't mean he wouldn't get hurt. How painful that would be. She rushed forward and hugged him tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. She truly didn't want him to go to war. The 10-year-old boy was about to be sent to the battlefield. Yet his grandfather was pressuring him to have children, even using the heir's position as a threat. But he wasn't going to obediently comply. He would rather step down from that position. The Duke was so angry he slammed the table. If you die, he roared, Lublin will be swallowed by the royal family. He had stained his hands with blood countless times to protect this family. He wouldn't hand it over to anyone, not even in his dreams. Watching the Duke's frenzy, Lihart couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. Compared to his grandson's life, the man feared the family's downfall more. But Lublin had to be destroyed by his hand, so he would definitely come back alive. Children were completely unnecessary. Before he could finish his protest, his wife agreed. When she heard that her husband had to go to war, she had cried her eyes out. Rather than wasting time with the Duke, she preferred to spend more time with her husband. Compared to the first time they were locked in a room together, this time was noticeably more harmonious. Lihart was about to say something when Alyssa covered his mouth. Holding his hand, she said, the first time should be with someone you love, not dictated by someone else's will. She reassured him that she had bribed the person coming to confirm the consummation tomorrow, and that Annie would also help. Deceiving the Duke wouldn't be a problem. After all, both the first night and the first kiss should be shared with someone you love to make them truly special. Looking at her gentle expression, Lihart was stunned. Love was a foreign concept to him. Having lost his mother at a young age, sold by his uncle, abandoned by his so-called father, and nearly killed by his own grandfather, his life had been nothing but darkness. But Alyssa was like a ray of light that suddenly shone into his world. She worried about him, defended him against others, and even cried for him. Although he didn't understand what love was, he was certain of one thing. He didn't want to lose the only person who belonged to him. The Emperor soon set the date for the expedition. On the surface, the enemy forces appear overwhelming, but in reality, they just want Lihart dead. So, before his deployment, he goes to the forest every day to fight monsters, returning covered in wounds each time. Alyssa is both distressed and angry, regardless of whether he agrees or not. She pulls open his clothes to help him apply medicine, leaving Lihart embarrassed. To survive, he trains desperately every day. Even his subordinate, Thompson, suffers alongside him. But exhausting oneself before deployment isn't a good thing. And the last moments should be spent with the most important person. After all, who knows when they'll meet again? These were originally words meant to persuade him, but unexpectedly, Lihart took them to heart. Remembering his wife asking him to come home early last night, he runs back without a second thought. Unexpectedly, upon entering, he wakes Alyssa, who had fallen asleep waiting for him. She frantically tries to celebrate his birthday. But he doesn't even know his own birthday. Looking at the birthday wishes on the card, she thought he would be angry. Unexpectedly, he smiles and even decides to take a day off to go on a date with his wife. This makes Alyssa overjoyed. However, in the middle of the night, the female lead's halo shines brightly. Lihart clearly made plans with her. It's truly too much. Her 10-year-old husband is going to the battlefield tomorrow. His young wife not only gives him a loving hug, but also a blessed safety necklace. Lihart is incredibly happy, so he also wants to tell his wife a secret. There's an escape route in this room. If you encounter danger, leave from there. No matter where you hide, I will definitely come back for you. Although he's still so young, Alyssa feels reassured. She turns and urges her husband to go to sleep. She must wake up early to see him off. But once he's asleep, even the heavens couldn't wake him. So, she makes him pinky promise to wake her up. Lihart agrees verbally, but he has no such intention. While his wife is asleep, he begins his one-sided farewell. Don't be sad if I'm not here. Goodbye, Alyssa. I'll be back soon. A gentle kiss becomes their last sweet memory of their youth. When Alyssa wakes up the next day, his side of the bed is already empty. He left without a word. She's both angry and sad. They made a promise. How could he leave without saying goodbye? She didn't even fulfill her duties as a wife. Fuming, the more she thinks about it, the angrier she gets. One second she's stubbornly insisting on teaching her husband a lesson. The next she's a dejected little bunny. Lihart, please be safe. From this day on, she becomes an outsider in this house. The maids blatantly ignore her. The old Duke doesn't acknowledge her either. Fortunately, there's still the sweet Annie. Her life isn't completely miserable. Just as she's comforting herself, she overhears the maids talking outside the door. A blonde maid is encouraging others to steal, claiming that the young Duke won't return alive. After all, it's clear he was sent to die. They need to find their own way to survive. Alyssa angrily pushes the door open. What way to survive? She wants to know too. The two maids are instantly terrified. The timid one is already admitting her mistake. But the bolder blonde maid is unrepentant and even provokes her directly, talking about the young Duke's death and the family's decline. How dare she say such things? Alyssa's eyes darken with anger. She immediately expels the blonde maid from the Duke's mansion and warns the others that if anyone else dares to act recklessly, they'll face her wrath. A month has passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone says Lihart will lose the battle. Although she believes in her husband's strength, she can't help but feel uneasy. Just as she's trying to reassure herself, Annie brings good news. The young Duke has won his first battle. She stands up in surprise. As expected of my husband, the weight on her heart finally lifts. But someone wasn't as happy for him. He confirmed the Emperor's birthday with Annie. A brilliant idea suddenly came to mind. Those pesky people. It's time to make them pay. A 10-year-old husband suffering on the battlefield, while the crown prince enjoys a feast at home. How can this little wife endure this? The moment Alyssa and her companion entered, the prepared spectacle was about to begin. Alyssa wore a polite, fake smile. Her eyes were locked onto someone in front of her. The crown prince still thought today was his stage. But the adults couldn't stop talking about Duke Lihart. After all, he's only around 10 years old. Yet he has already made great contributions to the empire. What a talent. Hearing this, the children seized the opportunity to flatter the royal family. Duke Lihart's victory is all thanks to His Majesty's good judgment. You're practically scolding the crown prince. But clearly, the flattery wasn't directed at him this time. The crown prince awkwardly agreed, inwardly fuming. If his father hadn't made him feign illness and given the chance to go to war to Lihart, perhaps he would have already won a victory. He wouldn't be subjected to these comparisons now. Just as he was fuming, laughter suddenly came from behind him. He turned around. Alyssa was chatting and laughing with two nobles. Isn't that the Duchess Lihart? The crown prince, along with a group of his followers, originally intended to find fault. But not only were Alyssa's manners impeccable, even her smile was so beautiful. Hearing Alyssa inquire about his health, he actually felt a little embarrassed. Saying that it's his father's birthday, how could he, as a son, not be present? Alyssa stammered, her face full of concern. The crown prince is so filial. How could there be rumors that he's afraid of the battlefield and deliberately feigning illness? Seeing the crown prince's expression when he was called out, Alyssa acted surprised. Her words implied disbelief. Hearing the crown prince's denials, I must have heard wrong. Faced with the sweet, innocent words of the little white rabbit, the crown prince immediately took the bait. He announced on the spot that he would join the volunteer army for this expedition. With that arrogant look, he had no idea what a foolish decision he had made. And Alyssa would soon let him know. The Duke presented a luminous stone worth 200 million, joining in the birthday wishes for the Emperor. The Emperor feigned politeness. How could he accept such a valuable gift? Before Lihart could speak, Alyssa quickly stepped in, flattering the Emperor's grace. For example, the Crown Prince just expressed his intention to join the volunteer army. What could be more valuable than this? Ignoring the Emperor and Empress's awkward expressions, she showered the Crown Prince with praise. The Crown Prince is incredibly brave. The Crown Prince is truly remarkable. With the Crown Prince on the expedition, we will surely achieve victory. Influenced by her flattery, not only did the Crown Prince successfully join the expedition, but he also gained the Duke's true approval. He even specially arranged a secondary role typically reserved for the hostess. He now felt refreshed and invigorated. The volunteer army, upon departure, would carry belongings from families to the knights on the front lines. Hearing this from the new adjutant, Alyssa immediately wrote a letter, hoping that her husband would be happy to receive it. Every word and phrase filled with her anticipation. But she never expected this war to last for 7 years. Looking at the contents of the letter, Lihart couldn't suppress the smile on his lips. The once arrogant little boy had now grown into a handsome, doting husband. He traced the dried flowers over and over again, carefully taking them out from his chest and putting them back. It turned out to be a safety necklace his wife had given him the night before he left for the war. His heart filled with longing for his wife. These small objects were the only things that could comfort him now. In fact, Thompson arrived late. The remaining enemy troops had already been cleared. Duke Lihart complained about his slow arrival. He felt incredibly wronged. Even the fastest feet couldn't keep up with someone who could fly. His true purpose for coming was because of a handwritten letter delivered by the emperor's envoy. Not only would a grand celebration be held for the army, but Duke Lihart would also be rewarded with anything he desired. But our Duke only wanted to go home. Since the celebration is for the army, it doesn't matter whether I'm there or not, right? The husband she yearned for day and night was finally coming home. He was ecstatic. The divorce papers, prepared for years, were finally about to be put to use. All he needed was the goddess's permission. That is, the agreed-upon divorce age with her husband. Then he could leave the Duke's mansion and be free. Speaking of which, Alyssa felt a sense of relief. She had finally made it. Saying goodbye in advance, she felt both happy and a little lost. Late at night, she flipped through the letters her husband had sent over the years. His personality seemed as dull as ever. She wondered if he had grown unattractive. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew across the balcony. She stood up in surprise. The wind felt so familiar. In the blink of an eye, Lihart appeared on the balcony. Long time no see, Alyssa. His white shirt made him look exceptionally handsome. It felt like a dream. Alyssa's heart pounded. She wondered why he had returned so early. The news that morning had said he would return in a few days. Because I missed. Before he could finish, her husband had already taken her hand. She was flustered. She thought he meant he missed home, but she blushed for some reason. Lihart couldn't help but smile, his eyes full of affection. When his wife asked if he wanted to bathe, he replied, "I've already bathed." He took his wife's hand and placed it on his cheek. "Do you want to feel?" This action startled her. He wasn't like this as a child. He was worried she wouldn't be comfortable and offered to sleep on the sofa. He poked her forehead. "Who said you wouldn't eat me up? So, it should be all right to sleep together, right?" He teased, making her laugh. "All right, let's sleep together." But he didn't expect her to fall asleep so quickly. Even her sleeping posture had become more demure. She no longer clung to him suddenly. He could only kiss her hair. Such a pity. Yes, it's been a whole 7 years. He's grown up. Alyssa had also risen from a young woman with no foundation to the position of lord. The north lacked food in the winter. But fortunately, the iron ore was dense and high quality. She had the unemployed citizens help the blacksmiths make farming tools. Then she traded the tools with the south for food. This solved the territory's warmth problem and allowed her to earn gold by selling tools and weapons. The veteran officials present held her in admiration and respect. It was clear such things weren't uncommon over these 7 years. As the territory's population and power grew, the emperor, already wary of Lublin, became increasingly restless. Initially, because of Lihart's prowess in the Jiden ritual, he summoned his advisor, Remer. He wanted a method that was both reasonable and lethal. It was this mustachioed man who suggested exploiting the 4 great families' pact, having the crown prince feign illness, and ordering Lihart to replace the crown prince on the battlefield. Later, when the duke fell ill, Alyssa took over the territory's affairs and changed the management style. He hadn't taken it seriously at the time. Now, the Lublin territory had both wealth and soldiers. He hadn't expected this young woman to be so capable. Now, Duke Xiao was also returning. But there was no need to panic. He would eliminate Alyssa before then. 7 years into their marriage, they met for the first time. She thought it was a dream. In the dream, her husband was handsome and well-built. Even his flirting felt so real. Too bad Duke Xiao was still on his way back to the city. The morning made Alyssa even more confused. The butler brought news of her husband's return. "Then let's go." The city gates opened. Trumpets sounded. The victorious knights entered the city, following Duke Xiao. After 7 years, her husband had finally returned. Something seemed amiss. Why did her husband look so much like the man in her dream? As he drew closer, she had a bad feeling. "Good morning, Alyssa. So last night wasn't a dream after all." He even chuckled. She hadn't even said a word. Lihart was summoned by the Duke. It seems the Duke is quite ill, yet all he cares about is urging Lihart to have children. "Since you don't love the girl I sent, then hurry up and have a child with your wife." He's completely out of his mind. Lihart was fuming. He ignored the Duke's nonsense, turned around, and left. Being urged to have children after winning a battle? Unbelievable. Tonight, he was determined to drink himself into oblivion. The knights raised their glasses, celebrating. He just sat there sulking, even ignoring Alyssa. Duchess shall have a drink. This barrel of ale, bigger than her face, was a token of the knight's gratitude and loyalty. Lihart scowled darkly. Alyssa completely ignored him and even stopped others from trying to persuade him. Alyssa stood up, holding the barrel. Everyone was momentarily stunned. After a few welcoming words, she raised the barrel. The heroes of Lublin couldn't resist her enthusiasm. She chugged the ale directly from the barrel. What a drinker! Not only was Lihart shocked, but even the knights gave her a thumbs up, as expected of the Duchess. After several large gulps, she was so drunk she could barely speak. But someone kept her company. She complained about her husband, who immediately defended her like a mother hen. Her companion, though seemingly tough, was actually soft-hearted, leaving Alyssa's companion completely bewildered by her words. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Lihart came to take the barrel away. Alyssa pouted. Can't we play a little longer? Lihart sighed indulgently and chuckled. Of course not. Alyssa played dead, refusing to leave. You'll have to carry me. I'm as heavy as a pig. The next second, she was swept into his arms. Lihart's strength was impressive. The princess carry was indeed a bit heavy. In front of a bunch of single men, he carried his wife home, just like a newlywed couple. Alyssa was drunk like a child. Lihart thoughtfully tucked her into bed. But Alyssa grabbed his hand. Drowsily, she told him not to worry. I'll just hold your hand and sleep. He sighed affectionately. But what to do? Just holding hands probably won't be enough now. The couple's first meeting in 7 years, and Alyssa was dead drunk. Alyssa woke up with a pounding heart, recalling her drunken antics last night. She was mortified. What would Lihart think if he saw her like that? Suddenly, the door creaked open. She pulled the covers over her head, pretending to be asleep, but couldn't resist peeking. Lihart was wearing his pajamas, his chest exposed. He looked amazing. Even the water droplets on his face looked sexy. She suddenly felt hot. Alyssa was mortified, thinking Lihart was too casual. But her eyes seemed glued to him. In the blink of an eye, he had finished dressing and was walking towards the bed. Alyssa squeezed her eyes shut, her heart pounding. This emotionless acting wouldn't fool Lihart. How long are you going to pretend to sleep? She had no choice but to sit up. She tried to explain herself, but Lihart handed her a hangover cure. As she took the cup, she cautiously asked if she had done anything embarrassing last night. Well, that's hard to say. Lihart's meaningful smile made her blush with shame and anger. Had she really done something last night? She felt out of sorts all day. The headache was bad enough, but the hangover cure Lihart gave her was more bitter than gall. She swore never to drink again. Suddenly, she heard a commotion outside. Going to the balcony, she saw Lihart. He looked so handsome when he was working. Whose husband was this anyway? Lihart hadn't just avoided an awkward growth spurt. He seemed to have become much gentler. As she admired him, she muttered to herself. Perhaps he heard her, because he suddenly looked up. She instinctively ducked back inside. Why? It was obvious, wasn't it? Because of love. She just hadn't realized it yet. The butler came looking for her, saying the Duke wanted to see her. She knew exactly what that meant. The Duke was here to urge her to have a baby again. If you dare to do anything behind my back, he threatened, I'll reveal your little secret. Just the thought of that scene terrified Alyssa. So this time, she truly gave in. Wearing a sheer nightgown, she forced down her discomfort, constantly reassuring herself that it was all right. After all, her husband wasn't someone who would force her. But in the original story, Lihart's son was conceived around this time. But she wasn't ready yet when her husband came up behind her. Seeing his angry face, she desperately tried to explain, afraid of being hit. Unexpectedly, her husband draped a sheet over her, speaking kind words and telling her not to mind Duke Shao. After a series of actions, her husband turned and left. She wanted to say something, but he was gone in a flash. She knew her husband did this for her, so for everyone's happiness, she had to get a divorce soon. To protect his 10th culinary venture, the boy only returned to his room late at night. Unexpectedly, he was caught red-handed by his wife tonight, and she wanted to sleep in separate rooms. He panicked. Why did Alyssa's nose suddenly turn red? She felt her husband was uncomfortable being with her. That's why? I'm not. Then why do you leave as soon as it gets dark? Lihart was a little embarrassed, stammering a lie about enjoying walks. In truth, he was afraid of losing control. Every night, seeing his wife asleep made him happy. He didn't want to give up the chance to sleep beside her, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Fortunately, his wife was interested in his walks. Walking in the sky. What's that like? Want to try? Alyssa was full of anticipation. She put on a windproof cloak and took her husband's hand, but she was still a little worried. What if I fall? Just hold on to me, and you won't. She awkwardly embraced him. Lihart's lips curled into a triumphant smile. He swept her into a princess carry. Suddenly, her feet left the ground. Held in his arms, she dared not move. The wind rushed past her ears. She closed her eyes tightly, afraid to look. Finally, her husband told her to open her eyes. The several thousand square meter Duke's mansion looked like a tiny toy house from this distance. It feels like a dream. It really is. Her husband's face was full of adoration. The fact that they pretended to spend the night together infuriated Duke Xiao. He not only rearranged Alyssa's room, but also wanted to send a new concubine. His daughter was so ill, yet he still hadn't forgotten about producing an heir. She was exasperated. She went to discuss countermeasures with her husband, but as soon as she opened the door, she saw her husband's freshly bathed, attractive physique. Both of them blushed instantly. She quickly composed herself and explained why she was there. Suddenly, there was an urgent knock at the door. The butler rushed in, panicked. Duke Xiao. He's not well. This was completely unexpected. Looking at the man on the bed, struggling to breathe, Alyssa felt both pity and sympathy. Duke Xiao had worked tirelessly for the family his entire life. Even on his deathbed, he hadn't thought about resting. She didn't understand. You can't take it with you when you die, so why do so much? Hearing that her husband wanted to be alone with the Duke, she politely excused herself, leaving Lihart alone. I wanted you to live a little longer, to see all your dreams shattered with your own eyes, and then live in agonizing despair and torment. But I never expected you to leave so peacefully. He called him grandfather for the first time, but his eyes were full of hate. So, Lublin is mine now. Duke Xiao's mouth opened and closed, his life ending filled with hatred and resentment. Lihart closed his eyes. Please, be sure to watch me from hell. Meanwhile, outside the Duke's city, a young boy covered in wounds watched as a trembling figure. Why are strange things happening in a place where monsters never appeared? She's a perfect match for him, yet she keeps thinking about divorce. Every day, she works overtime to teach her husband how to handle affairs and transfer financial authority to him. But after receiving news from her friend that the retirement villa, which took 5 years to build, is almost complete, Alyssa feels reluctant. Originally, when her husband returned triumphantly, she had planned to ask for a divorce. She didn't expect the Duke to suddenly pass away. Her husband's inability to show whether he's grieving or happy makes her heart ache. This marriage was ultimately a contract. Although she genuinely acted as the mistress of the territory for 8 years, for her husband's happiness, she must leave. Besides, her husband has now regained his territory and can handle all matters big and small. It's time to leave. After dismissing everyone present, Lihart, I have something to tell you. But seeing his face like this, she couldn't bring herself to say it. Hesitating and stammering for a while, she finally decided to speak. Typically, at a time like this, if nothing unexpected happens, something unexpected will happen. A knight rushed in, panicked. A large number of monsters have been discovered in the western forest, and they're incredibly destructive. Upon hearing this, Lihart immediately prepared to deal with the situation. Alyssa also found it strange. Monsters that shouldn't appear in winter have been appearing frequently lately and harming residents. Perhaps it's not because spring is approaching. Could someone be deliberately orchestrating this? Just as she was thinking this, her assistant reported that an avalanche had occurred in a mountain village. Although there were reportedly no casualties, she was still shocked when she arrived at the scene. The entire village was buried under snow. In -50-degree weather, how could the villagers survive? She quickly dismounted her horse to offer comfort. No one was injured or buried, but a little girl kept crying because her brother had gone up the mountain to check things and hadn't returned. Hearing that it was the western forest, Alyssa's heart sank. Wasn't that where the monsters had appeared? She pretended to be calm, praising the little girl's bravery and assuring her that everything would be all right. But a search had to be launched immediately. She wasn't sure, though. All she could do was pray that the little boy would be safe. But what she feared most came to pass. A pack of one-horned wolves, drooling, surrounded the little boy hiding in the bushes. He was terrified. Would he really not make it back? The young couple had been married for 7 years and hadn't had children yet. Then they both fell off a cliff thousands of meters high, in -50-degree weather. First, an avalanche buried the village, and then a siege led to the appearance of monsters. To help the villagers survive, Alyssa urgently prepared relief supplies. The problem was quickly resolved, but the missing boy was still nowhere to be found. Only a bundle of firewood was found deep in the forest. As it grew darker, she ignored the knight's advice and decided to join the search party. But halfway there, she encountered something even stranger. These human-faced, thin monsters are naturally afraid of humans. Yet now they were also coming out of the mountains. She frowned. Something wasn't right. Something must be influencing them. They searched from day to night, but they couldn't find a single trace of the boy. Now it was snowing again, just as everyone was advising her to leave. Suddenly, a child's scream pierced the air. Quickly, over here. The little boy was terrified, but thankfully unharmed. He finally calmed down a little, but then suddenly cried out, his face filled with terror, staring at Alyssa. The monster had reappeared, covered in blood. He turned to flee, trembling, but it was too late. Am I going to die here? He thought, facing the lunging beast. Instinctively, he reached out, desperate to live. Unexpectedly, the moment his fingers touched the monster, tiny blue sparks erupted. The creature that had been about to devour him transformed in an instant into a docile puppy. What's going on? She couldn't understand, but they were safe, for now. However, the situation was still dire. They were trapped on a cliff edge, surrounded by monsters. What do we do? Alyssa was completely lost. Just then, a familiar wind blew. Lihart appeared in midair, like a god, and commanded everyone to step back. Mere monsters dared to threaten his wife. They were courting death. Booming thunderbolts rained down, making the monsters first stand on end. Their bodies crackled with electricity. If only there were a barbecue, it would be perfect. Within seconds, the monsters were obliterated. Alyssa was both moved and overjoyed. But the lightning was too powerful. Cracks appeared beneath his feet. In the blink of an eye, the stone crumbled, and he plummeted. Lihart! Alyssa screamed as he fell. He reached out, and thankfully, managed to grab the edge. His hands clutched the cliff face. But the speed was too great. Even he, with all his power, couldn't change direction. He could only use his wind magic to lessen the impact. With a splash, the knights peered over the edge. Aside from the rushing water, there was no sign of Duke Xiao or Alyssa. A thumb-sized stone could contaminate an entire area, even turn people into zombies. Lihart had a bad feeling. After all, these stones only existed in the canyon, which was protected by a barrier. This was a man-made disaster, not a natural one. To uncover the truth, he decided to investigate the canyon. Just as he suspected, the barrier guardians within the canyon had fallen. Corrupted by the stones, their souls had been drained, leaving them as mindless husks. The only way to end their suffering was a swift strike through the heart. After laying the soldiers' remains to rest, he led the others deeper into the canyon. The further they went, the more suffocating it became. Suddenly, they smelled a clear, pure scent. It was the purifying lake, imbued with cleansing power. Although it could suppress evil energy, they couldn't let their guard down. Something could still jump out at any moment. Lihart had just finished warning his soldiers. When danger struck, a monster, in human form, emerged from the darkness. It seemed to understand human speech, but when it heard the warning to find its rest, it only advanced faster. With a single blow, the monster sent Lihart flying 10 meters. As his sword pierced its body, the monster spoke. I've waited so long for this day. It sounded like a sigh of relief, but the words chilled Lihart to the bone. The monster felt strangely familiar. Lost in thought, he didn't notice the black ooze drifting towards him. A searing pain shot through him as it covered his body. Meanwhile, Alyssa's fever finally broke. From Annie, she learned about the recent monster attacks, all caused by a demonic presence. Her husband had gone to investigate. Her gut told her the Emperor was behind it all. To suppress Lublin, he's even resorting to harming the common people. It's truly despicable. Despite Annie's reassurances, Alyssa was still worried about her mother. Since returning, she hadn't seen her husband for several days. Especially after dreaming of the original Alyssa, she felt even more uneasy, afraid that Lihart would be cold to her. After all, something had happened that the original Alyssa's husband disliked. What if he started to hate her? She couldn't bear to imagine such an outcome. Just then, a maid came rushing in, frantically shouting, "Madam, it's terrible. The Duke has collapsed." Duke Xiao, who wasn't afraid of even death, was brought to tears by his wife. What was supposed to be a beautiful night turned out to be just an accident between husband and wife. He even told her to pretend nothing happened, saying, "Don't take it to heart. Look how childish you're being." But when she learned he had collapsed, Alyssa's urgency was genuine. Dragging her feverish body, she rushed to see her husband, desperate to know if he was all right. Yet, he merely glanced at her and walked right past. He even said he didn't have time. She felt both disappointed and confused. What was going on? Her husband seemed to be avoiding her. Could it be because of that incident? It seemed her husband truly detested intimacy. Annie, noticing her distress, said, "Don't worry, madam. Duke Xiao is strong. He'll be fine." Annie's sweetness lifted her spirits. Rather than fretting alone, she decided to talk to her husband directly. Cheerfully instructing Annie to prepare several delicious dishes for dinner, she went to the dining room, only to be informed by the butler that her husband wouldn't be joining her. He had decided not to dine with her for the time being, for fear of spreading the evil energy. Looking at the empty seat, though saddened, she wasn't about to give up. When midnight came and her husband still hadn't appeared, she went straight to his office. Magnanimously, she told him he didn't need to take responsibility for that night, only asking that he not be angry. Somehow, this only seemed to anger him further. He snapped, "I won't." Once again, he walked past her and opened the door. "Go back, Alyssa. Don't come to see me again for a while." Alyssa said all right, but tears welled in her eyes. As she resolutely left, this time, her good night caused Lihart a pang of guilt. Earlier that day, in the canyon, he had not only been attacked by black ooze, but had also been covered in it and even fainted. If someone as strong as him couldn't handle it, how could his sick wife? To resist the urge to embrace her, he hadn't dared to say more than a few words. Moreover, the monster's words, my heart's desire, while killing it, had left him deeply unsettled. He hadn't meant for things to escalate like this with his wife. Covering his face, he felt miserable. When would his precious wife understand him? Alyssa had a high fever. Hearing her husband call for a doctor, she felt even worse. Since their argument in the study, the couple hadn't seen each other for over a fortnight. It wasn't until they were departing for the capital to investigate the truth behind the monsters that Alyssa caught a glimpse of her husband from afar. Each of them traveled in separate carriages. This dampened her spirits. Watching the butler and servants see them off, she had a feeling she might not have the chance to return. After all, it was just a contract that had kept her there for so long. It was time to propose a divorce. But she, who never got carsick, was unexpectedly and violently ill this time. After 15 days of continuous travel, she not only felt dizzy, but also weak and feverish. Although they were nearing the capital, Lihart still ordered them to make camp. He was incredibly worried. As soon as the black energy he'd been afflicted with dissipated, he rushed to see his wife. Seeing his wife's discomfort, his heart ached. He should have told her to stop and rest sooner. But Alyssa didn't want to hold everyone back either. As they were talking, Annie brought over a bowl of invigorating soup, saying it would surely restore her energy. Looking at the tempting food, Alyssa felt nauseous and wanted to vomit. She pushed her husband away and ran outside frantically. Her stomach churned, making her extremely uncomfortable. Seeing her husband about to call a doctor, she immediately refused, claiming she was just carsick. But she had a bad feeling. Moreover, she hadn't had her period this month. Could she be pregnant? The thought brought her no joy. She couldn't forget her husband's childhood vow to end his family line and his disgust towards children in the orphanage. A disgust so strong he'd even wanted to kill them with his own hands. She couldn't let that happen. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the Duke's mansion in the capital. Lihart immediately wanted to call a doctor. No matter how much she insisted she didn't need one, he wanted to stay by her side. The moment she saw the doctor, her mind went blank. She didn't know what to do. Whether it was fortunate or unfortunate, Lihart was called away by his subordinates. As soon as he left, Alyssa, claiming to feel better, refused the doctor's examination. Although she wasn't certain if she was pregnant, she asked Annie to do something for her. She was having a child. Fear came with it. The doctor confirmed it. Alyssa's face was filled with helplessness. Leaving the doctor's house, the two of them remained silent for a long time. Annie hadn't even known when she and the Duke had consummated their marriage, let alone that she was pregnant. Could it have been the day they fell off the cliff? Yes, it just happened. How ridiculous. She was preparing for a divorce, and yet this happened. Annie, heartbroken, held her mistress's hand, blaming herself for not taking better care and for being so careless. Seeing her grow more and more upset, Alyssa forced a smile to comfort the silly girl. But what should she do now? She was at a loss. Since she was having a child, it would be better to stay together, wouldn't it? Listening to Annie, she felt disheartened. Lihart not only didn't want children, but he particularly loathed them. What? That Duke slept with you without any protection. What a scumbag. And she had thought he was a good man. The more Annie thought about it, the angrier she became, eventually turning to self-blame. Patting her small chest, she declared, I will protect the child in your womb. Just please don't bear this burden alone. Thank you, Annie. Alyssa was deeply touched. Having Annie around always made her feel safe. However, despite saying that, she had read the original story. The child she was carrying was none other than the novel's nom per Haynes, a child deprived of love. Lihart's loathing for him had begun even while he was still in his mother's womb. Growing up in a world devoid of love, his heart gradually became twisted. He even kidnapped and imprisoned the female lead, much like a pitiful creature yearning for love. Alyssa swore to herself that she would never let this tragedy happen again. Therefore, leaving was the best option. She had considered staying and working alongside her husband for the development of their territory. But in the days following the old Duke's death, she overheard something. The butler had intended to persuade Lihart to start his own family, assuming that the reason they hadn't had children yet. That was his dissatisfaction with the arranged marriage. The butler wasn't entirely wrong. However, Lihart's resentment was directed towards the old Duke himself, so much so that he wanted to end the family line. Alyssa still clearly remembered that face filled with utter disgust. If 3 people were destined for unhappiness, then 2 wouldn't be so bad. She stroked her belly, finally feeling a flicker of maternal joy. To prepare for the child's arrival, that she began reading various parenting books, because nom per Haynes would also inherit the family's power. Thus she also had to learn how to manage those abilities. She remembered how Lihart, as a child, had no guidance and only learned after suffering many injuries. So she couldn't let that happen. Just then, the butler brought a letter. It was from Ansel, saying that the villa was complete. He had even included photos. She was both excited and happy. It was time to prepare to leave. Suddenly, she didn't know when, but Lihart walked into the room. He looked at the play script in her hand. What's this? So it's Namperhane's child. Her husband, however, wasn't pleased. Ever since their divorce discussion fell apart, Alyssa had been worried. But it was her husband's adamant refusal to divorce that made her realize the difference between reality and the original story. And this difference stemmed from the change in her relationship with her husband. Since he could come to care for her, perhaps he could also cherish the child in her womb. Nothing was absolute. She shouldn't constantly fear the original story's ending. With this thought, she decided to talk to her husband again. But before she could even step out the door, she bumped into him. Lihart, what are you doing here? Her husband seemed a little embarrassed. He wanted to have lunch with her. But I just had breakfast. Lihart suddenly blushed, looking a bit nervous. Then let's go for a stroll in the countryside. I'm afraid you'll be bored at home. Why are you so shy? You remind me of how you were during our courtship. She gladly accepted his offer. Alyssa happily sent her husband off to eat. This time, she had to succeed. Although she wasn't feeling her best, after Annie dressed her, she looked as beautiful as a flower. The moment she turned around, Lihart was captivated once again. As their eyes met, they were both speechless with a flutter in their hearts. He took her hand, and they boarded the carriage bound for the countryside. But Alyssa didn't understand his feelings. Looking at her silent husband, she assumed it was because of their argument the previous night. The reason he refused her divorce proposal must be because he saw her as family and a friend. A glimmer of hope sparked within her. Maybe they didn't have to divorce. Maybe the three of them could live happily together. Lost in thought, she succumbed to the drowsiness of early pregnancy and drifted off to sleep. Lihart gently held her in his arms. He didn't understand why she always wanted to leave him. After 7 years apart, they were finally together again, yet Alyssa brought up their agreement from 8 years ago. Holding her tightly, he felt a pang of despair. He couldn't bear to be separated from her now. How wonderful it would be to stay together like this forever. The cherry blossom forest in the countryside was as beautiful as a fairy tale. He pictured a family of 4 living happily there. Alyssa was filled with longing. Children are truly adorable, aren't they? Are they? I don't really think so. Do you want children of your own? He asked indirectly, wanting to know if she had changed her mind. Lihart was a little surprised, thinking that she wanted children now. Although he had intentionally avoided having children because of his grandfather, but he didn't dislike them. However, he had heard that pregnancy and childbirth could be very painful for women. And Alyssa's health has been really poor lately. He couldn't be so selfish. It would be better to wait until she recovered. So, he could only insincerely say he hadn't thought about it. But just as he was about to explain why, he was interrupted by Thompson and the child. The child was too mischievous. Alyssa had just been deeply hurt. Hearing the child's cheerful laughter, she smiled radiantly again. But she was sure Lihart truly didn't want children. It was all just her fantasy. It seemed that to avoid everyone's unhappiness, she really had no choice but to leave. Alyssa was pregnant, but Lihart thought he was terminally ill. The man who usually had a stern face was now crying like a child. It was truly unfair. Alyssa's resolve to leave wavered again. When she confirmed that Lihart really didn't want children, she was truly heartbroken. But Lihart had suffered mental abuse from his father since childhood, so his reluctance to have children was understandable. She shouldn't have placed her hopes on someone else. Thinking it over, she felt it was a good thing, because she no longer needed to worry about futile expectations. If she couldn't get a divorce smoothly, she would run away. Just as she was thinking this, Annie appeared with medicine. Taking a little before meals could alleviate morning sickness, although it varied from person to person and might not be very effective. But it was already good enough. Alyssa was very grateful for Annie's thoughtfulness. Unexpectedly, Lihart suddenly appeared. His serious expression was frightening. Had he discovered the truth? Alyssa's hand, clutching the medicine bottle, trembled uncontrollably. Annie withdrew. She was prepared. What illness do you have? Faced with her husband's question, she silently withdrew her hand. She wanted to confess everything. Unexpectedly, Lihart suddenly embraced her tightly. Calling her name, were you planning to die alone, somewhere without me? I won't let you go. Lihart's voice gradually became lower. Alyssa then realized Lihart had misunderstood. She hadn't expected him to cry so sadly. She raised her hand and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, smiling. Actually, Annie gave me medicine for gastritis. It's not a terminal illness, so don't worry. But Lihart still wanted to take care of her. She had no reason to refuse. Saying okay, she agreed. Thinking that Lihart was busy with work and wouldn't stay by her side for long, she didn't expect him to stay for more than half a month and sleep next to her every night. Looking at Lihart's sleeping face, she was extremely worried. As her morning sickness gradually disappeared, her belly would grow bigger day by day. If this continued, she would be discovered sooner or later. She caressed Lihart's face, hoping he would understand her choice. This silent embrace would be their final farewell. Early the next morning, Lihart finally put on his work clothes. Before leaving, he repeatedly reminded her, if you feel unwell, you must call the doctor. Even if you have no appetite, you must eat on time. He nagged like a mother hen. Alyssa simply couldn't handle him. Seeing Lihart about to leave, she got out of bed to see him off. Although they were talking and laughing, when she heard Lihart say, I'm leaving, she felt reluctant again. She hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth from his chest. Lihart didn't notice anything unusual. Don't worry, I'll be back as soon as possible. After properly saying goodbye and watching Lihart leave, Alyssa's nose turned red with happiness. Turning around, she told Annie they had to leave immediately. The pregnant protagonist finally ran away. Passing through a dark and narrow secret passage, she saw the door to freedom. With a creak, the blinding sunlight made her unable to open her eyes. Annie was worried about Alyssa's pale face. Should we rest before we go? Although this was a good suggestion. But the Duke's mansion would discover their absence by tomorrow morning at the latest. So they had to leave as soon as possible. Glancing back at the castle, Alyssa felt a pang of reluctance. Hoping Lihart would take care of himself, the mistress and maid soon arrived at a merchant caravan. There was a pickup coat on the ground. He had left everything they needed there. The head of the caravan personally greeted them and arranged a delicious breakfast. The necessary supplies and payment were already loaded onto the carriage. They had even thoughtfully arranged for escorting mercenaries. It had to be said, the leader was very efficient. A prime steak with bread and salad was served. Alyssa had little appetite. Trying to force herself to eat a little to regain her strength, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her stomach. Faced with Annie's concern, she simply said she had no appetite. But when she stood up to leave, her vision suddenly went black. Fortunately, Annie was quick-witted and caught her. She then realized Alyssa had a high fever and her breathing was weakening. Annie was in tears. She wanted to wait until Alyssa recovered, but having finally escaped, Alyssa just wanted to leave quickly. Unsure what to do, the caravan leader suggested a good solution. Meanwhile, Lihart was still busy with the magic stone incident. Landing with a flourish. Where was he going so early in the morning? Zimao was so scared he broke out in a cold sweat. He greeted Lihart respectfully, but his hands fidgeted behind his back. Unfortunately, the dagger he was hiding was spotted and knocked away. Lihart punched Zimao, sending him sprawling to the ground with a sickening crack. Zimao cried out in pain, begging the Duke for mercy. Then tell me the truth quickly. The truth was about to be revealed. Danger suddenly struck. Fortunately, he deflected the incoming projectiles. But such a simple attack made him suspicious. Turning around, he saw two figures in black lunging towards Zimao with daggers. Lihart tried to intervene, but the nagging pain in his shoulder flared up. Fighting through the pain, a dark power suddenly erupted from his palm. The three attackers fell silent almost simultaneously. Even Lihart himself was startled. Looking at the bodies on the ground, he wondered, did I kill them? Before he could figure it out, a subordinate rushed over, shouting, terrible news. The Duchess, she's gone. Pregnant and on the run, Alyssa suddenly developed a 105-degree fever. Fortunately, the caravan leader was a kind man. He not only took her to his own small villa, but also found a female doctor to care for her. Finally, after 3 days, Alyssa revived, feeling weak but alive. Annie breathed a sigh of relief and excitedly went to get her some food. But Alyssa wanted another checkup. Fortunately, the baby was fine, and she would be able to travel again in a few days. She was grateful for everyone's help. If she had insisted on leaving, there might have been serious consequences. Annie then appeared with a worried look, saying a noblewoman had come with an urgent matter. But Alyssa didn't recognize the red-haired woman. I heard you were looking for me urgently. Did you bring a doctor with you? Seeing the woman's distraught expression, Alyssa realized this was a bold request. Receiving confirmation, the woman grasped Alyssa's hand. Please, help me. The woman's daughter had been running a fever since the previous night. Because of a contagious illness spreading in the nearby villages, the only doctor had gone to the neighboring village. She had come here out of desperation. Alyssa was taken aback by their daring decision. Taking a child to a place with a contagious illness would be very dangerous. They had heard a noble had arrived and decided to take a chance. Although nobles usually come to places like this for recuperation, there's no guarantee of success. Alyssa, soon to be a mother herself, deeply understood the woman's maternal anxieties. Without hesitation, she agreed to help. Night quickly fell. The little girl's fever finally stabilized. The woman was very grateful and wanted to know her benefactor's name. Alyssa fabricated a name on the spot. After all, she was on the run. She didn't expect the woman to ask about her husband. Alyssa turned her head, a little embarrassed, and lied, claiming to be divorced. She figured she would never see the woman again, so it wouldn't matter. But to her surprise, the lady before her turned out to be the emperor's half-sister, now married to a marquis. "I'm so sorry," the woman said. "I haven't been in the imperial capital long enough to recognize your highness." The princess was unpretentious. When she heard that Alyssa was pregnant and divorced, she felt both guilty and sympathetic. She immediately took off her necklace and placed it in Alyssa's hand. Alyssa reminded the princess of a dear friend who had also come here pregnant and alone. The princess hadn't taken good care of her friend, leaving a lifelong regret. "If you encounter any difficulties, please come to me," she said. It was a surprisingly intimate exchange for a first meeting. Alyssa was deeply moved. "Thank you so much, madam." Meanwhile, back at the temple, the Pope was worshipping the gods. The Celt family had cultivated popes for generations. Only the strongest and most victorious could lead the temple. Now, only Aiden remained of their lineage. Unexpectedly, during his fervent prayer, he sensed that the Duke was in danger. He abruptly opened his eyes and called to a nearby priest, "Can you summon the captain of the knights?" Lihart was frantic, searching everywhere for his runaway wife. He looked like he was ready to kill someone. If he hadn't found the coachman who had taken Alyssa and learned she had gone to a merchant guild branch, someone might have already lost their life. Just as he was about to reach the merchant guild, Lihart was suddenly stopped by his subordinates. "Right or wrong, when you see madam, apologize first. Madam is always right." Lihart was in no mood to listen to this. He had only gone to work, and when he returned, there was only a letter. Alyssa wished him a happy life. He felt terrible. How could he be happy without Alyssa? Furious, he arrived at the merchant guild. "I demand to see the branch manager immediately." The clerk was flustered, but the branch manager had his own pace. He refused to divulge any client information. When asked about a blonde, blue-eyed woman, even if he knew who it was, he simply and mercilessly refused. However, he eventually agreed to a search. If he hadn't, the place would probably have been turned upside down. The knights searched everywhere, but found no trace of Alyssa. Lihart was getting a headache. Another knight suddenly brought him a letter bearing Alyssa's name. The handwriting wasn't Alyssa's, but after reading the contents, he immediately summoned his men. "We're leaving now." Meanwhile, Alyssa was already on her way to the docks. The princess had been so kind to her. It made Alyssa wonder if her own mother, if she were still alive, would have shown her the same concern. She had been worried about the long journey by carriage and whether her body could endure it. Fortunately, thanks to the branch manager's help, they were taking a much shorter route by water. But Annie wasn't happy. She had thought she could protect Alyssa, until the day Alyssa collapsed with a fever. She had been naive. Besides crying and worrying, she could do nothing. If it happened again, she didn't know what she would do. She had secretly written to the Duke. But even as Alyssa boarded the ship, the Duke hadn't appeared. She was incredibly anxious. After several days of travel, both Alyssa and Annie fell asleep as soon as they boarded. What happened next was completely unexpected by Alyssa. Alyssa woke up in the middle of the night, her mind heavy with worries, and stepped out of the room. She looked at the starlit night sky. She felt the sea breeze on her skin, but she couldn't appreciate it. Would she ever be able to return to the Duke's mansion? Even just once. They had only been together for less than a year. Why were her memories of Lihart the most vivid? She looked at the brooch she had taken. It was perhaps the only thing she had to remember him by. A wave of sadness washed over her. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept past. Startled, she looked up. A familiar figure, like a god descending on the wind, appeared in midair. It was Lihart. His wife had run away. He had found her as quickly as he could. He saw her flinch and step back in fear. He pulled her into his arms and gently caressed her stunned face. "Where did you think you were going with my child?" He snarled, a warning in his voice. "Since you're carrying my child, that you're not going anywhere, no matter where you run to." His harsh tone softened in her ear. He suppressed his anger, remembering his subordinate's advice. Lihart's eyes suddenly reddened. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Let's go inside and talk." Annie had been worried. Where had Alyssa gone in the middle of the night? Then she saw the couple enter the room together. Perhaps wanting to give them time to talk, Lihart said he would step out for a moment and return. Alyssa nodded, confused. How had her husband found her? Suddenly, Annie knelt down. It turned out that when Alyssa was sick and fainted, she had kept calling Lihart's name. Annie, frightened and unsure what to do, had written to the Duke without Alyssa's knowledge. Tears streamed down Annie's face. She felt terribly sorry. Alyssa wasn't angry. She comforted Annie and told her there mustn't be a next time. Strangely, despite her plan's failure, she felt a sense of relief. Although she had been startled to see Lihart, she felt more longing and joy than fear. Remembering how she had run away, afraid that her husband would harm their baby, she felt like a fool. The truth was finally revealed. Lihart entered the room again, wanting to talk to his wife. Once Annie left, he asked the question that had been on his mind. "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" "Because you didn't want a baby." Hearing this, he froze. Alyssa said she had overheard his conversation with the old butler. and that's why she had run away, intending to raise the baby alone. He remembered the day Alyssa had suddenly brought up the topic of children. He finally understood. She had been trying to tell him all along. He held her tightly, repeating apologies. It's all my fault. I should have paid more attention to you. What he had said to the old butler hadn't meant he didn't want children. So please, don't run away again. The misunderstanding was finally cleared up. Alyssa's pent-up grievances welled up. Tears of relief streamed down her face. Perhaps things had changed. Their child wouldn't suffer the same fate as the previous one. She and Lihart could live happily ever after. Listening to her husband's repeated apologies, she finally broke down and sobbed. The moon descended from the sky. The merchant ship changed course and docked. This was all thanks to the Duke. He had paid double the compensation to have the ship stopped. His subordinates had already prepared a carriage. As soon as they saw Alyssa, they immediately expressed their feelings. The Duke is still new to managing the territory. We can't do without you, madam. Alyssa felt embarrassed for causing them worry. Thankfully, everything was still in time. Lihart took her hand. Let's go home. While Alyssa was pregnant, Lihart was the one suffering from morning sickness. The night the couple returned home, everyone at the Duke's mansion was overjoyed. A lavish dinner had been prepared. But Alyssa had no appetite. Despite taking anti-nausea medication, she couldn't suppress the queasiness. She stood up and vomited until her face turned pale. Seeing her suffer like this for the first time, Lihart Shinkundig held her from behind. I'm so sorry, it's all my fault, Lihart said. Alyssa reassured him she was fine, but excused herself to go rest. No sooner had she left than Thompson found Lihart. There are a few things you absolutely must do when your wife is pregnant. First, congratulate her. Then, tell her how happy you are. Finally, give her a bouquet of flowers. You won't get another chance like this later. If you asked him how he knew, it was because he'd been preparing for this moment. Although he'd waited 27 years. Under his tutelage, Lihart finally got the hint. The room was filled with rose petals. Alyssa had just finished her bath and entered. That when she was instantly stunned. Lihart appeared, holding a bouquet of roses. Congratulations on becoming a mother. After his congratulations, he promised to strive to be a good father. Using the excuse of being good for the baby, he insisted on sleeping with Alyssa from that day forward. While Alyssa was still wondering if he was serious, he managed to get into bed with her, half coaxing, half pushing. Unexpectedly, he froze the next second. Alyssa asked him if he wanted to touch her belly. He was both excited and worried about hurting the baby. How could that be? Alyssa took his hand and placed it on her belly. Our child is right here. Although he couldn't feel anything yet, he could already sense the magic of fatherhood. Addressing the child, he whispered, "Welcome to the world. You must be healthy and strong." The air was filled with happiness. The morning breeze blew gently. Alyssa rolled over, burying herself in the soft pillow. Opening her eyes to this sight, she felt shy. But seeing such a handsome face every day, perhaps even taking pictures would be unnecessary. She couldn't resist reaching out and poking his cheek. Her husband suddenly opened his eyes and stroked her face, saying good morning. She felt extremely embarrassed. Suddenly, her husband became serious and quickly rang the bell to summon Annie. Alyssa seemed to have a fever. He was about to call a doctor, but Alyssa shook her head in refusal. Upon hearing that a low-grade fever is common in early pregnancy, Lihart was shocked. He looked dejected and full of self-blame. It seemed he needed to visit the library and do some research. Seeing Alyssa heading for breakfast, he suddenly stopped her. Thinking it was something important, Alyssa waited. Unexpectedly, he simply said good morning to the baby. Alyssa felt a strange warmth in her heart. It felt like she and her husband had truly become a family. Her heart fluttered with happiness. As the food was served, Lihart experienced something unexpected. The moment he bit into the sandwich, a wave of nausea overwhelmed him. He retched, and food scattered everywhere. Lihart, what's wrong? The couple's first public display of affection. That made many envious. But it also led to a misunderstanding with a friend. Seeing the princess arrive, Alyssa stammered, trying to explain. However, with the arrival of the royal family, everyone had to bow in greeting. The crown prince and princess both appeared, but Ansel was nowhere to be seen. He had stood her up. Alyssa had planned to explain in person. Fortunately, thanks to her husband's natural attentiveness, her worries were temporarily forgotten. However, the princess, who had just walked away, interrupted the couple's sweet moment. Her words were filled with hostility towards Lihart. It turned out that Alyssa had previously saved the princess's daughter. Having heard that Lihart was divorced, the princess had wanted Alyssa to marry her son. Lihart's face flushed with shame after hearing these words. Just then, a howl rang out. The hunting competition was about to begin. Alyssa nudged her husband, quickly seeing off the reluctant guests. She immediately turned and apologized to the noblewoman. But the noblewoman felt it was unnecessary. After all, it was the Duke, the one who made his wife leave home, who was at fault. She defended her husband vehemently. The noblewoman couldn't help but laugh. In her eyes, this was a display of deep love. But how could that be? Wasn't speaking up for one's husband a given? Alyssa refused to admit it was out of love. However, the misunderstanding with the noblewoman was finally cleared up. Holding hands, they went off to enjoy themselves. Lihart, on the other hand, was exasperated. The crown prince had only killed a female deer, yet his sycophants were praising him as a god on the battlefield. But this so-called god had only been on the battlefield once in his life. Not only did he constantly hold back the entire army, he also loved to incite discord among the ranks. He hadn't even stayed a full month before slinking away. Anyway, he had no talent or interest in this kind of flattery. He just wanted to leave quickly and be by his wife's side. Unexpectedly, the crown prince decided to bother him. Hero of the battlefield, how come you haven't even hunted a single stupid animal? Perhaps I've been on the battlefield too long, so I have no interest in weak animals. He subtly implied the crown prince was incompetent, watching with satisfaction as the other man fumed. Lihart smiled contentedly and turned to leave Shao. But halfway there, he ran into another annoying person. Wasn't this the count who always gave the emperor terrible advice? Disgust was evident in his eyes. No matter what the count said, he didn't want to respond. Unexpectedly, the count claimed it was for his own good. Huh, you almost killed me several times, and you have the nerve to say it's for my own good. He turned to the count. If you spout any more nonsense, I'll tear your mouth apart. Watching him leave, the count remained elegant. The duke will understand later. I truly am doing this for your benefit. What should one do with a handsome and stylish husband? Dress up beautifully, of course, and show off your love publicly, making others envious and jealous, but unable to do anything about it. It turned out that a few days ago, an invitation to the hunting competition was sent from the palace to the duke's mansion via 800-mile express delivery. Considering Alyssa was pregnant, Lihart planned to attend alone. But she refused. Alyssa insisted on going. The royal family, in order to control Lublin, would definitely not overlook the child in her womb. After all, compared to capable adults, children were much easier to manipulate. She wouldn't just sit and wait for their schemes. It was time for everyone to see how Lublin had grown over the past 8 years. Lihart was utterly defeated. All right, I'll listen to you. Since his wife wanted to go, they had to start preparing. Over the next few days, the couple visited every clothing store in the city. Although their legs were aching from exhaustion, Alyssa was happy. Seeing that they were leaving for the palace tomorrow, she was sleepy but didn't want to sleep yet. When her husband returned from work, she quickly sat up in bed, saying she wanted to make him look like the star of the show. In reality, she just wanted to play dress up. She took his hand and started explaining her outfit ideas. But as soon as she finished, her husband obediently took off his shirt. She blushed. Why are you undressing without any regard for the occasion? What do you mean, without any regard? This is our room. You're my wife. His words left her speechless, trying to say something to ease her embarrassment. She noticed the scars all over his back. She couldn't help but gently touch them. Did it hurt when you got these? Hearing her husband say he couldn't remember, she felt even more heartache. He was going to be a father now. She wanted him to take care of himself. Don't shoulder burdens alone. Don't endure pain in silence. Alyssa wanted to share Lihart's burdens. Her words warmed Lihart's heart. The bond between the young couple deepened. The hunting competition was fast approaching. Noble ladies meticulously prepared their attire, not only to flaunt their wealth, but also to display their husband's affection. A certain redhead, decked out in limited edition clothing, naturally became the center of attention. However, her moment of glory lasted a mere 3 seconds before the subject of everyone's gossip shifted. After all, it was the Lublin ducal carriage. Moreover, it was the duke's first public appearance since coming of age. The redhead and her clique were prepared to witness a spectacle, convinced that Alyssa and the duke's relationship must be strained. But they were quickly proven wrong. Not only had the duke not grown into an awkward adult, he was also quite doting towards his wife. The two appeared loving and well-matched. The redhead fumed with anger. Meanwhile, in a distant village, Ansel was still foolishly waiting. Lisa hadn't arrived at the agreed-upon time. Instead, he was met by a middle-aged man, the village's longtime doctor. Seeing a new neighbor, he had come to introduce himself. Upon hearing Ansel mention that the owner of the house was the supposedly deceased daughter of the previous owner, the doctor dropped the bread he was holding. He kept repeating, "Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Is something wrong?" Ansel's questioning revealed that Alyssa had supposedly died of pneumonia 8 years prior. After a sweet night with his wife, Lihart was experiencing morning sickness. The doctor, however, beamed. Apparently, it was a sympathetic pregnancy symptom, the ultimate sign of a loving husband. Lihart suddenly felt enlightened, though he was puzzled by the occasional pain in his shoulder. When does that happen? He wondered. Stroking his chin thoughtfully, he declared, "It hurts when my wife isn't around." The doctor was speechless. If your wife doesn't have regenerative or healing abilities, then you must be mistaken. The doctor, claiming he needed to return to his research, quickly fled the scene of such blatant affection. Not wanting to worry Alyssa, Lihart specifically instructed his subordinates not to tell her. Even when Alyssa expressed concern at lunch, he simply said he was fine. What about Viscount Norris, the little fox he struggled to capture the other day? After 3 days and nights of interrogation without any results, he was planning to release him. Knowing the Viscount would likely be killed by the mastermind behind the plot, Lihart, having just received a threatening message, felt uneasy. While glancing nervously at Alyssa, he rephrased his statement. Alyssa was both pleased and satisfied. She suggested releasing Norris. Based on her understanding, the Viscount had worked for Marquis Paris for a long time, but only as an errand boy motivated by profit. There wasn't a strong connection between them. In other words, severing their connection would be relatively easy. Therefore, they should release him and then rescue him at a critical moment. Norris wasn't stupid. Realizing he'd been abandoned, he would surely come running to them. Having worked for the Marquis for so long, he might have inadvertently acquired some useful information. Having him join their household could be beneficial. Lihart, enlightened by this idea, readily agreed. He decided to follow Alyssa's suggestion and give it a try. Meanwhile, a knight investigating the temple reported back to Aiden. There was nothing suspicious in the grove where he had sensed the anomaly the other day. Could I have been mistaken? Aiden wondered, troubled. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Long time no see, Aiden." "Your Highness." The princess looked the same as ever. But then again, so did he. The ring and necklace on his chest remained. A constant reminder of the past. They had another close friend, Yulia. The three of them had grown up together. Besides their enviable friendship, there was also the love between Aiden and Yulia. The princess had witnessed their happiness, but also its eventual demise. 20 years ago, the imperial family began to restrict Aiden's family. Problems also arose in the canyon around that time. Aiden went to investigate, but was ambushed by a small, dark creature that flew out and knocked him unconscious. The previous emperor died during this period. The current emperor framed and executed his half-brother, brazenly ascending to the throne. Yulia was also implicated and forced to flee to save her life, branded a traitor. By the time Aiden awoke, everything had spiraled out of control. His family had been dismantled. Even when he finally found his wife, it was only to discover her cold corpse. The princess hated her brother and the empire for this. Yet Aiden never abandoned the empire. Perhaps it was because his wife's presence still lingered here. "So who are you praying for today?" Faced with Aiden's question, the princess smiled faintly. She wanted to say it was for her family, but that wasn't true. This time, she wanted to pray for a new friend. The woman, dressed only in a maid's uniform, had publicly slapped the empress and princess in the face. She even attracted the envy of various talented individuals. It turned out that the hunting competition had just begun. The empress invited the noble ladies to afternoon tea, ostensibly to thank them for their attendance, but in reality, it was a subtle display of wealth. After all, this winter-blooming flower tea was so rare that only the imperial family could drink it. Others couldn't buy it. Alyssa saw right through these childish tricks. The only fortunate thing was that this flower tea was safe for pregnant women. But her morning sickness hadn't subsided yet. To avoid revealing her pregnancy, she merely pretended to sip the tea. However, it was a gathering of women. How could such pettiness go unnoticed? The empress turned and targeted her sister-in-law first. "You haven't been seen in the imperial city for a long time. Why go to the temple instead of the palace?" This implied that the princess was having an affair with someone from the temple. But the Marchioness didn't take the bait, so the empress could only awkwardly end the topic with a joke. However, mentioning the temple reminded Alyssa of something. Since the Celt Marchioness's rebellion 20 years ago, the imperial family and the temple had been openly hostile. Although the imperial family controlled the empire, they could never replace the temple's position within the hearts of the people. Despite their mutual dislike, they couldn't destroy each other. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Alyssa's confidence surged. Her goal in participating in this hunting competition, besides showing everyone that Lublin was loyal to the imperial family, was to make more allies. If she could take this opportunity to win over the temple, it would undoubtedly strengthen her plan. However, she became so happy that she spilled her tea all over herself. The quick-witted Annie immediately stepped forward to clean the stain. Unexpectedly, this irritated the princess, simply because Annie wasn't wearing a typical uniform. "It seems the Duke's family is as wealthy as the rumors say." Alyssa had been waiting for her to say this. She smoothly explained the benefits of working for the Duke. Anyone who had served for a certain number of years would receive new clothes as a reward. While that was what she said, it was actually a tactic to attract talent. After all, at an event centered around the imperial family, everyone's eyes would naturally be on them. Rather than spending money on dressing herself up, it was better to invest in her servants and knights. By using her servant's appearance, she could highlight the Duke's generosity. The nobles might not be impressed, but those working in lower positions would certainly be envious. Who wouldn't want to work in a better place? Seeing that the groundwork had been laid, she casually mentioned that a mine had been discovered on the Duke's land and that he was looking for partners. Based on the lady's reactions, she could discern who held financial power in their households. She accurately identified her target clientele. The women quickly became engrossed in the conversation. Having her spotlight stolen, the Empress was displeased. She feigned a cough to change the subject and halt the discussion. But looking at all those eager eyes, hoping for a partnership, Alyssa had no reason to panic. I never thought I'd be defeated by a dessert. Smelling the strong buttery aroma, her stomach suddenly churned. Fighting back nausea, she quickly stood up. But as soon as she did, a wave of dizziness washed over her. Suddenly caught by a hand, Lihart said, "Excuse me, my wife hasn't been feeling well lately." As everyone stared in surprise, he scooped Alyssa up into his arms. "Goodbye, everyone." He carried his precious wife away, leaving Salsa Ly in front of everyone. The princess fumed. Lihart, however, was busy comforting Alyssa, pulling out 2 Alpenliebe candies, his eyes full of concern. But his kindness towards his wife was mocked by the crown prince, who whispered in someone's ear. Watching him hold Alyssa tightly in his arms, he smirked. Taunting him, he said, "So whipped. All you do is revolve around your woman. I heard you haven't consummated your marriage yet. Is it that you're not up to it?" Lihart had been holding back, so as not to cause a scene in front of his wife and child. But Alyssa couldn't tolerate it, exclaiming, "Oh my God, our child will be so sad to hear you say that." Everyone panicked. Lihart, however, burst out laughing, declaring that their wedding night was not only passionate, but also resulted in a blessed gift. "Carrying a baby is tiring, so we'll say goodbye for now." The crown prince's eyes widened, unable to believe that Lihart, after being on the battlefield for 7 years, had managed to have a child before him. And on the first try, no less. Even the 2 sycophants behind him couldn't help but murmur, "It seems the crown prince really isn't up to par." This infuriated him. Alyssa truly despised this kind of person, who lacked ability but loved to throw their weight around. But the things he had just said made Lihart feel embarrassed. "How could you be so calm?" he asked. Alyssa apologized. "I shouldn't have announced the pregnancy yet, but I couldn't stand to see you being insulted. Besides," she added, "I was telling the truth, wasn't I? That night was wonderful." She glanced at Lihart, expecting him to be angry, but he was already blushing furiously. He laughed, agreeing with her. But that night, Lihart wasn't laughing. After coaxing Alyssa to sleep, a maid delivered a letter for Alyssa. Seeing it was from Ansel, he wanted to burn it. Although Alyssa had said they were just friends, there was no guarantee Ansel didn't have other intentions. Maybe he was waiting for their divorce so he could take his place. If he said something like that, Alyssa would be disappointed in him. While he was agonizing over this, Alyssa suddenly woke up. He obediently handed her the letter. Watching Alyssa intently read the letter, he felt incredibly anxious. Even the next day at work, his mind was consumed by the letter's contents. It turned out, Ansel had asked Alyssa to meet him that afternoon. He spoke to his secretary, but his mind was miles away. He abruptly ended work, telling himself he was overthinking. But he found himself outside their bedroom door. He called for Alyssa to open it, and immediately froze. She looked so beautiful, wearing a pink dress. As she happily ran towards him, his jealousy boiled over. "You look awful in that," he blurted out. His wife was going on a date with her rival, dressed like a celestial being. Wouldn't that bewitch anyone? Lihart sulked. "It's too ugly. Go change." He knew he was being childish. But he couldn't bear the thought of Ansel, who had had a crush on Alyssa since childhood, seeing his beautiful wife like this. Before he could finish, Alyssa started crying. "Can't you just say it looks nice? That it suits me?" She yelled, "I want to wear it. I want to wear this dress right now." He hadn't expected such a strong reaction. Panicked, he tried to appease her but was thrown out of the room. He pounded on the door, but there was no response. Regret gnawed at him. He cursed his own stupidity. How could he have said such things just because he was jealous? Alyssa must be going through so much with the pregnancy. After much deliberation, he knocked again. "I'm sorry," Lihart said. "Go and talk to Ansel. Come back when you're ready." The redness in Alyssa's face finally began to subside. She told her maid to help her fix her makeup, but the hurt lingered. Although the maids took her side, saying Lihart had no sense of fashion, Alyssa wasn't unreasonable. She felt she had overreacted, behaving like a child. Neither she nor Lihart knew that this was a hormonal side effect of pregnancy. Pregnant women could experience uncontrolled bursts of emotion or sadness. Hearing the maids confirm that this was normal for pregnant women, Alyssa regained her composure. As she finished fixing her makeup, Ansel arrived at the ducal residence. She was not only grown up now, but also a renowned entrepreneur. Led by the butler, she walked towards the back garden. Glancing back, she saw a scowling face in an upstairs window. She had always known the Duke was difficult, but she hadn't realized he'd become even colder since returning from the war. Goodness, Alyssa's life must be difficult, she thought, recalling Alyssa's previous canceled meeting. She worried that Alyssa had been caught trying to run away. So, as soon as she saw Alyssa, she voiced her concerns. Is this marriage a happy one? She asked. Alyssa wasn't sure what constituted happiness, but she didn't feel unhappy. Ansel was relieved. However, she still couldn't understand Alyssa's perspective. How could Alyssa think the intimidating Duke was naive? Where was the naivety? What surprised Ansel even more was the news of Alyssa's pregnancy. She offered stiff congratulations, swallowing the words she had originally intended to say. After all, how could she talk about what she had seen at the villa while Alyssa was focusing on her pregnancy? What exactly had she witnessed there? This was the two women's first meeting, yet they didn't recognize each other. The encounter was even quite unpleasant, due to the male pope's position. Alyssa, eager to establish a good relationship, immediately offered a donation of $2 million to the temple. However, the pope saw right through her ulterior motives and refused the donation. Undeterred, Alyssa pressed for a reason. The pope was blunt, not only refusing to provide what she wanted, but also warning her against trying to use the temple for her own gain. Alyssa felt embarrassed. She had hoped to leverage the temple's popularity with the people, to gain power for her family, and, in turn, suppress the royal family. That's why she had planned to donate first, and then find an opportunity to get closer to the pope. She never expected the Marchioness to choose the temple for their meeting, and introduce her to the pope. It was a golden opportunity she couldn't miss. But now, it seemed she had to give up. If the pope accepted her donation, the temple would inevitably be drawn into the power struggle. So, even though he was poor, the pope refused donations to maintain absolute neutrality. He had upheld this principle for 20 years, solely to protect those who believed in him. Alyssa understood this perfectly. Such a resourceful and principled person wouldn't be easily defeated. But she wasn't without a breakthrough. She decided to change her strategy. Alyssa admitted her motives weren't pure, but they weren't solely for personal gain. She'd heard that the temple had taken in many orphans from the recent war. Didn't those children need help? Once the Lublins donated, the royal family would also feel pressure to contribute. So she asked the pope to use her, implying the temple could still maintain its neutrality. Just as the pope hesitated, a young priest broke the silence. Seeing him practically itching to leave, Alyssa knew she had failed. Marchioness Baguette comforted her, saying it wasn't a big deal. Besides, this outcome was expected, and she already had a new plan. The next day, she went to the temple again, having researched the pope's schedule beforehand. Her first step was to feign a chance encounter, although she wanted to collaborate with the temple for her own benefit. Seeing those orphaned children, she genuinely wanted to help. She also truly admired the temple's inmates. After all, providing education and protection for children was originally the royal family's responsibility. Yet, the temple had shouldered all of it and persevered for over 20 years. If it weren't for the Marchioness's support, they probably wouldn't have lasted this long. So, to dispel the pope's suspicion, she had to prove her sincerity. She went to a spot the pope was sure to pass. While she was fretting over how to appear natural, Annie suggested admiring the flowers by the roadside. She thought it was a good idea. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, she saw a lone flower that had withered. Perhaps because it wasn't within the flower bed, both mistress and maid were instantly overcome with sympathy. Annie went to fetch water to water it. Alyssa thought it was a good idea. Watching Annie's retreating figure, she didn't notice the faint blue fluorescence emanating from her own body. The light gradually coalesced into water droplets, which landed directly on the flower. When she turned back, she was surprised to find that the withered flower had instantly revived. It even radiated a golden shimmer. Before she had time to examine it, her target appeared. She quickly stood up and tried to engage him in conversation. When asked why she was at the temple, she used prayer as an excuse. She had expected him to ask what she was praying for, but he simply offered a brief blessing and excused himself, saying he had urgent matters to attend to. He seemed both gentle and aloof. She had no reason to continue bothering him. However, she was resilient. After giving herself a pep talk, she decided to rest early and try again tomorrow. Unexpectedly, Lihart suddenly appeared, holding a children's book. He wanted to read it to the baby. He looked cautious, as if afraid of being sent away. Alyssa then remembered that after their last argument, to avoid awkwardness, he had been deliberately going to bed early every night. Since he was making the effort, she told him to go ahead and read. This delighted Lihart. He sat on the edge of the bed and solemnly opened the book. Once upon a time, in the north of the forest, there was a forest, and one entered. His stilted, halting rhythm made Alyssa's face turn red, trying not to laugh. How could anyone read a fairy tale so dully? But seeing his earnest expression, she found him endearing. She hadn't expected her husband, of all people, to take prenatal education so seriously. As she watched, She couldn't resist reaching out and touching his stomach as if it were some precious treasure. Her husband looked at her quizzically. Flustered, she made the excuse that there was hair on his face. She thought she must be going crazy. Using the excuse that she had to get up early to go to the temple the next day, she quickly climbed into bed. Since chance encounters weren't working, she changed her plan again. For example, she could pray regularly at the temple or care for sick orphans. Today, she brought delicious chocolates for the children. The young priest felt bad that she was being so thoughtful while pregnant. Fortunately, the Pope no longer deliberately avoided her. Even though he wasn't particularly fond of sweets, he accepted the chocolate she offered, seeing how well he gets along with the children. Please use my name, Lubelin's name, for this. The Pope seemed to be wavering. The Duchess had taken in a child. The material was actually a rival in love who had given birth to a son. Furthermore, in the novel Birdcage, that the handsome male lead could unleash flames. Although he was the crown prince's son, that he led an unfortunate life because of it. It turned out that after learning of Alyssa's pregnancy, that the crown prince and his wife fell on hard times. Married for 4 years, they couldn't even produce an egg. Yet, some people, having just returned from the battlefield, conceived an heir on their first try. Faced with their parents' urging, the young couple thought they just had to endure it. However, the emperor wasn't satisfied. Even the crown prince wasn't sure if he had any illegitimate children, so he immediately ordered people to search. This put the crown princess under immense pressure. She dragged the crown prince to meet with the golden girl, but the girl wouldn't even bother speaking to him. He was furious, but he only dared to blame Alyssa. Fortunately, the maid came to take the baby. The child's hiding place had been found. Good. Deal with it immediately. Meanwhile, in a bookstore, Alyssa was choosing fairy tale books. She noticed a sneaky, dirty child that's stuffing a fairy tale book into his clothes. She reached out to stop him, patiently reasoning with the child. After all, stealing is wrong. So, give me the book in your arms. Suddenly, the bookstore owner appeared with a laugh. But seeing the book in the little beggar's arms, that his expression immediately changed. Not only did he grab the child, that he was actually going to hit him. How could a few-year-old child withstand such a slap? Alyssa couldn't stand it anymore. She tried to intervene, but the owner told her to get lost. How dare he be so impudent in front of the mistress of Lublin? After she revealed her identity, that the owner became obedient. But you can't protect this kind of person. In the owner's eyes, that someone who started stealing from a young age couldn't change. Alyssa didn't think so. Perhaps because she was about to become a mother herself. That she sided with the child. After all, the owner was also at fault. Not only did he not teach the child, he actually wanted to hit a few-year-old. She pointed at the owner and offered to compensate for the loss. But the owner also had to apologize to the child. The owner had no choice but to comply. But it was this biased act that was about to change the child's life. She took the child to the bakery alley. Seeing the pitiful sight of someone who hadn't eaten in years, she couldn't help but feel heartache. But why did he look so familiar? Especially with that head of dark red hair. Little one, what's your name? Leon answered in a childish voice. She was startled. It was the crown prince's, that scoundrel's, son. Her son's future rival in love. Remembering the 2 royal knights she encountered on the street earlier. Thus she had a bad premonition. In the original story, the emperor ordered the search for the crown prince's illegitimate child. But the crown princess decided to strike first. One dark and stormy night. Little Leon was cornered in a dead end by an assassin hired by the crown princess. Although he unleashed flames to protect himself, that he burned down the entire village because he couldn't control the fire. This incident shocked the empire. Little Leon was discovered and taken to the imperial palace. A childhood similar to Lihart's. Alyssa couldn't help but feel sorry for him. A child without a mother. How could she leave him alone? But she couldn't bring him back to the ducal residence. Suddenly, an idea flashed through her mind. She thought of a good place. Leon, would you like to come with me? Leon agreed. This left the assassins hiding in the shadows speechless. Fortunately, the two arrived safely at their destination. Seeing the high priest, Alyssa finally felt at ease. She hoped the high priest would take the child in. But after learning the child's identity, the high priest hesitated. The 5-year-old beggar conjured a spark for the first time. The Pope at the temple was stunned. He hadn't expected the little beggar to be of royal blood, yet living on the streets since he was young. He was also being hunted by the crown princess. But even with such a pitiful situation, the Pope had no intention of taking him in, because beautiful sparks always burn everything. Not to mention, this child didn't understand how to control it properly. This concern did indeed happen in the original story. Alyssa knew this all too well, but it was precisely for this reason that she wanted the Pope to take him in. With your careful guidance, even deadly sparks can bring warmth to people. Why do I think so? Because you are the most upright person I have ever met. Her sincere words successfully moved the Pope. He agreed to take Leon in, but also requested that she find evidence of the crown princess's involvement within a week. After all, Leon's royal identity didn't benefit the temple in any way. Alyssa readily agreed. The first thing she did after returning home was to organize her memories of the assassination attempt on Leon. The crown princess hadn't used her family's forces, but instead hired mercenaries from a certain guild. Although the matter was simple, she couldn't go find the mercenaries herself. Her husband's appearance suddenly gave her an idea. That was to ask her husband to handle it. She was apprehensive at first. After all, it suddenly involved assassination and an illegitimate child, and without any evidence. Unexpectedly, her husband agreed readily. What was even more unexpected was, "I believe everything you say. Even if I'm being deceived, I'm willing." Her husband's unconditional trust and foolish words made Alyssa's heart flutter. Wanting to say something but too shy, she used a cough to cover her embarrassment and excused herself to sleep. Seeing her flustered and blushing, Lihart couldn't help but be amused. Not long after, he barged into the mercenary guild alone and demanded to see the person in charge. A few mercenaries were initially startled, but they weren't pushovers. This hothead grabbed a dagger and lunged. Unexpectedly, the other person simply dodged and grabbed him by the back of his neck. The clang of a pitchfork hitting the ground startled everyone around. Lihart repeated his previous demand and finally managed to see the person in charge. He got straight to the point upon meeting him. Quickly recall the mercenaries who took orders from the crown princess. Seeing the scarred man's denial, he lost his patience. A gust of wind from Lihart's attack nearly knocked the scarred man off his feet. Looking at the shattered made-in-China glass window behind him, the scarred man had a hunch. Lihart walked towards him step by step. "If you dare defy my orders, you'll all die." With his ruthless and concise words, he successfully obtained the evidence. Thinking of getting it back to his wife quickly, he was unexpectedly followed before he could even leave. He was a bit speechless. He quickly darted into another alley, then suddenly appeared behind the person in the air. "Are you looking for me, Count Alden? That wife of yours is an imposter." He finally understood. The real Alyssa had died 8 years ago. The girl in the painting in the villa also looked different from Alyssa as a child. Ansel felt a chill down his spine. Who was the Alyssa he knew? This thought kept interrupting his thoughts. He wanted to find Lihart and tell him the truth, but he hesitated to speak. He hadn't expected to be called a spying rat. This violent and venomous man. How would he react to Alyssa after learning the truth? After much deliberation, he decided to be unreasonable. "Just how much do you love her?" Lihart already considered Ansel a rival. Upon hearing this question, he immediately slammed his hand on the table in anger. Did he think he could steal his wife? But the answer determines whether I can tell you the truth. Facing Lihart's potential incomprehension, Ansel hesitated for a long time. But he finally revealed how he renovated the old mansion for Alyssa and recounted his conversation with the doctor. Alyssa died 8 years ago in the ruins. Don't think Lihart was fortunate. He felt the same way at the time. When I saw the portrait in the villa, I had no choice but to believe it. Hearing this, Lihart's heart tightened. If this news was true, it meant his wife had concealed her identity. But his first reaction was fear that his wife would be in danger because of this. So he had to stop it from happening. After all, he couldn't bear to see his wife get hurt. He desperately wanted to know more. But Ansel didn't pry further, because he was also afraid the girl would be in trouble. He had wanted to tell Alyssa, but couldn't bring himself to do it. "That's why I decided to tell you." Lihart breathed a sigh of relief and, unusually, praised his rival for doing well. Compared to his rival's surprise, he seemed very calm. No matter the truth, Alyssa was still his most precious treasure. His response made Ansel feel ashamed. He had originally thought this was a perfect opportunity to win Alyssa over. He hadn't expected the Duke's love to be no less than his own. He felt disappointed, but also happy for Alyssa. However, since he was able to confess his desires so directly, Lihart didn't feel so bad. As long as he didn't show it in front of Alyssa. After warning his rival, he hurried home. Seeing his wife sleeping restlessly, he patted her with heartache. No one knew better than him that the previous Duke, who arranged this marriage, couldn't have been deceived. And Alyssa had lost her memory at that time. Even if she regained her memory, she might have already forgotten. The person capable of concealing all of this was that old Duke. But he couldn't ask a dead man for the truth. But perhaps there was one person who could tell him the answer, the old Duke's vice-captain. He ordered Thompson to find him immediately. Meanwhile, the secret letter from the mercenary guild canceling the assassination order had reached the crown princess. Having already heard that Alyssa took the child, she flew into a rage, flipping tables and throwing teacups. Amidst her fury, a new scheme began to brew in her mind. The Duchess dared to threaten the crown princess's response, but the other party didn't even dare to breathe heavily. Alyssa received a letter early in the morning. It was an invitation from the crown princess to enter the palace. So it was a hongmen banquet. A smirk played on her lips. It was just what she wanted. The next moment, she arrived at the palace alone. Seeing the maid waiting at the door, She realized the crown princess was even more eager than her. Following the maid, she entered. "Your Highness, Crown Princess," she curtsied elegantly. The crown princess, of course, also acted gracefully and properly. She even specifically thanked Alyssa for coming. "Considering how difficult it is to be pregnant, you are too kind. But this is the first time you've summoned me." I was truly startled. On the surface, the two were harmonious, but the real contest had just begun. The crown princess thoughtfully offered tea, but the tea wasn't suitable for pregnant women. Alyssa wasn't foolish. She politely declined with a mention of morning sickness. After another exchange of pleasantries, the crown princess's intentions finally became clear. She'd heard that the Duchess was sponsoring some orphans. Upon receiving confirmation, her eyes lit up with excitement. Hearing that the children were entrusted to an orphanage, she eagerly inquired about its name, claiming she wanted to do something meaningful. "But why did you choose to sponsor that particular one?" The crown princess was taken aback by Alyssa's question, suddenly at a loss for words. Seeing Alyssa's radiant and subtly mocking expression, she claimed she sponsored all the orphanages in the empire. She had never felt so speechless in her life. Since hinting wasn't working, she dropped the pretense. "Where did you hide that child?" The crown princess looked as if she was about to faint from the pressure, but Alyssa feigned ignorance. Enraged, she slammed her fist down, overturning the teacup, and threatened to report Alyssa to the emperor. Unfazed, Alyssa responded, "Is it wrong to take in children without parents? Or are you going to claim I've hidden His Majesty's grandson?" Alyssa continued, "You probably don't even have any decent evidence. A mere country bumpkin from a Viscount family. How dare you be so insolent?" The crown princess looked as if she was about to explode. Alyssa calmly watched the performance, and just as the crown princess was about to lose control, she slid a piece of paper across the table. It was evidence that the crown princess had hired assassins. How it came into Alyssa's possession was irrelevant. The problem was that the crown princess, in her position, had tried to kill an innocent child. "Remember this," Alyssa warned. "If you want to keep your precious life, don't harm any more innocent children." After delivering her warning, she tucked the evidence into a small bag right in front of the crown princess. Then, with a bright, saccharine smile, she said, "Let's meet again sometime." She watched Alyssa leave, and the crown princess could only swallow her anger. The moment the door closed, the sounds of crashing and smashing erupted from the room, much like Alyssa had predicted. What else could the arrogant and haughty crown princess do but seethe? The first time Dad made the baby cry on his first attempt at childcare. "Well, who told the little thing to be married to my wife?" Lihart thought smugly. "He has good taste, I must say. But Alyssa belongs only to me." It was the day Alyssa was visiting the temple. Just as she was about to leave, Lihart insisted on going with her. He wanted to see the child. Perhaps it was because they shared similar childhoods. He was concerned about the child's future. Although still young, the child possessed unusual powers. Alyssa wanted to respect the child's wishes and only wanted him to grow up healthy and happy. So, of course, Lihart went with her. But upon seeing the child, he was confused. The child kept calling Alyssa sister. But wasn't the child's hair supposed to be red? He asked, and learned that the child was wearing a wig and was pretending to be a relative of the Pope. Before they could talk further, Alyssa was about to leave Lihart alone with the child. He just wanted to stay close to Alyssa. "But I have important matters to discuss with the Pope," Alyssa explained. Lihart felt like a puppy being abandoned. He could only watch her leave with a forlorn expression. Suddenly, the child called him uncle, and Lihart almost deflated. Just moments ago, the child had called Alyssa's sister. But little Leon was just too cute, and he invited Lihart to play in his room. How could he be angry with a child? Little Leon tilted his head, his big eyes full of curiosity. "Uncle, are you and sister friends?" "No, we're married," Lihart replied, unintentionally making the little boy cry. Good thing he had candy with him. Kids will be kids. One piece of candy, and he was overjoyed. Their relationship instantly improved. As soon as they got to the room, little Leon toddled over to the fireplace. His hands were releasing sparks. Lihart thought he was playing with fire. "But I just wanted to make you warmer." Watching the little one's serious expression, he felt an inexplicable pang of sadness. Because being able to release power at this age meant he'd either experienced a life-or-death situation, or extreme psychological torment. Even Alyssa felt Shin Kung for him, so how could he not feel anything? He secretly gathered his magic throughout the room, as wisps of wind and sparks converged. "Uncle, look, I lit a fire." He affectionately stroked the little one's head. "It's so warm." Meanwhile, the Pope stood before the statue. Sensing Alyssa's arrival, he had a secret to confess. Everyone else seems to be doing the whole marry first love later thing, but this dummy already has a baby, and still treats the child's father like a stranger. Suddenly, a glimpse of a sheer nightgown. Alyssa finally realized her feelings. She had intended to change, but her husband appeared at that moment. "Is that a new dress?" Seeing her husband's surprised look, She felt incredibly embarrassed, afraid of being misunderstood as intentionally seductive. But her husband acted very naturally and even draped a loving blanket around her. Having just been embarrassed, she suddenly felt annoyed. While it was true the weather was getting warmer, shouldn't he have said it suited her and looked good? Thinking this, she called out to Lihart, "Doesn't this dress look good? It's not suitable. It looks good." Although reluctant, it was finally the right answer. "But your stomach seems to be sticking out." She instantly glared at her husband. His soothing words were no longer heard. All she could think about was her protruding stomach. Wasn't he saying she had gotten fat? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She abruptly sat up in bed and slapped Lihart's arm like a flapping cape. Looking at his bewildered face, she said, "Nothing. I think there was a mosquito," leaving him utterly confused. She felt satisfied at the time, but regretted it the next day. It had been a perfectly normal conversation, yet she had inexplicably lashed out. It made it seem like she had dressed that way to please him, but there was no need for that. After all, no one tries to please a friend. She muttered to herself, trying to convince herself, but then suddenly realized something was wrong. She couldn't help but picture her husband's handsome face. Could she really have impure thoughts? She gasped. She seemed to have discovered something incredible. She finally understood her feelings for Lihart. It wasn't the fondness of a friend, but the attraction of a woman for a man. And it was so intense. But what should she do? She didn't know how to face her husband. The thought of sharing a room that night made her face flush crimson. Suddenly, she heard someone call, "Alyssa." Why did she have to run into Yuha at this moment? She felt his usual concern, but she couldn't remain calm. Subtly pulling away from her husband's hand, she said, "Let's go back to our room." Lihart was worried by her unusual behavior. His wife must be sick. Fortunately, the doctor said there was nothing wrong, and the baby was healthy. If you feel any fetal movement, be sure to respond to the baby. You're in a stable period now. You can also travel around to change your mood. The two new parents listened attentively, only to blush when the doctor advised them to be appropriately intimate. After the doctor said goodbye, Alyssa's excitement couldn't be contained. "Should we go on a picnic?" Blushing slightly, she expressed her desire. But to some, it seemed as if she had a 104-degree fever. "So, maybe it's better to go later." But the doctor said it's okay. Lihart still felt uneasy. What if it affected the baby? Listening to her husband's reasonable analysis, Alyssa suddenly felt a surge of hormones. Does the baby's importance mean I'm not important? After his wife cried, he finally went up to her. "I love you. Do you see my sincerity?" Alyssa had waited for this moment for so long. It felt as beautiful as a dream. After all, she had just lost her temper at him. She had felt like he only cared about the baby, but after calming down, she regretted it. But she really couldn't control herself. Lihart must be disgusted with me now. Unexpectedly, he was the one who found her first, calling her name. Lihart knelt down on one knee. This was quite surprising. But even more surprising was that Lihart bravely expressed his inner thoughts. "Because it's the first time in my life I've had someone so precious, I don't know what to do. Could you please like me a little?" His choked voice was extremely humble. "Just like you truly like me." Alyssa couldn't help but feel a pang in her nose, her heart in turmoil. Does he feel the same way I do? She wasn't sure, lowering her head. "I don't hate you. On the contrary, I like you very much. But my kind of like is probably different from yours." Lihart's eyes instantly lit up. Unexpectedly, his wife then said she wanted to sleep alone. He abruptly stood up and hugged her tightly. "Are you sincere when you say you like me?" The 6-foot-tall man was like a child who had made a mistake. "Even if you don't admit it, it's okay. I will prove my sincerity." This was his first confession in 7 years of marriage. Alyssa still couldn't believe it. She was afraid her husband was only saying these things out of responsibility. "But I love you simply because you are Alyssa, and I fell in love with you a long time ago. Then why haven't you ever said you loved me?" His wife cried uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." It wasn't that Lihart didn't want to, but he didn't dare. He worried it was unrequited, and he was also afraid that this love would pressure his wife into leaving. "Now it seems it's all my fault." He gently embraced his wife, the tears in the corners of his eyes once again emptying his heart. He used to only think about revenge. It was as if that was all there was to life. "But ever since you came into my life, the emptiness in my heart has been filled with warmth. How could one not love such a radiant girl?" His goal of revenge had subtly changed. "Now I only want to be happy with you. With our child. This is not only my goal, but also my wish. So, will you help me achieve it?" Alyssa was so moved she cried again. She reached out and stood on tiptoe, as if only in this way could she reciprocate that passionate heart. Finally, she got her wish and embraced her beloved. She was still secretly delighted the next day. It turned out that being loved felt so amazing. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. She thought it was Lihart. But unexpectedly, it was Annie. It turned out that a letter had arrived from the palace. And it came with an invitation. It was for a tea party held specifically before the founding of the nation. She then remembered there was such an event in early July. But why hold a tea party at this particular time? Moreover, the crown princess and the empress didn't seem like people who would invite her. After all, the last time at the palace had been quite unpleasant. After thinking it over, it must be because of that incident. She told Annie to reply that she would attend, but at the same time, she would send a letter to the Earl's mansion. That confident look in her eyes clearly indicated something was up. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were plotting against someone for the first time. They were publicly humiliated. This exquisite tea party hosted by the empress had only one requirement, to wear a pink evening gown. But the invitation sent to Alyssa specified a yellow gown. And the Marchioness's was blue, to prevent them from communicating after their rebellion. The crown princess even deliberately wrote the same mistake. The starting time, seeing that the tea party was about to begin. Only those two hadn't arrived. The crown princess couldn't help but glowed inwardly. She thought her scheme was brilliant. She even started fantasizing about the scene of her and her mother-in-law stepping on those two. A glance, and her lackey immediately understood. Oh dear, it's about to start. Why haven't we seen the Duchess of Lubin yet? The lackey, whispering, started rumors. After stirring up dissatisfaction towards Lubin, the queen appeared, passing the burden to her daughter-in-law. What's going on? The crown princess acted very helpless. Since the Duchess said she would attend, then I believe she won't be absent. My goodness, you're so kind. Hearing this flattery, she couldn't help but smirk. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, one after the other. Zheng Ali's mask. Oh, I'm so sorry. Alyssa and the Marchioness arrived, smiling. There was a bit of traffic on the road. Not only did they arrive on time, but they also wore dresses matching the theme. The crown princess was dumbfounded. How should she interact with her mother-in-law now? She didn't know that her supposedly clever scheme, in Alyssa's eyes, was nothing more than using what little brain she had. Things like dress color and time. Just ask anyone and you'll know everything. She furrowed her brows. Time to act. Actually, the time on my invitation was wrong. And the dress code was different too. Did the maid mistakenly think that His Highness and I aren't on good terms? Really? How could a maid do such a thing? The young ladies chimed in. The crown princess was both angry and unable to lash out. She desperately needed a scapegoat. She slapped her maid. How dare you do this behind my back? I'm so sorry, madam. As expected, her act of righteous indignation worked. The clueless young ladies all blamed the poor maid. The maid apologized profusely. It's okay. I forgive you. Everyone makes mistakes. So, Your Highness, please calm down. That look was clearly a warning. How could the crown princess stand this? The atmosphere was so oppressive that no one dared to breathe. It was the perceptive extra who broke the tension by serving tea. The topic of conversation shifted. The tea party finally proceeded peacefully. Meanwhile, at the family meeting, Lihart was similarly confronted by a villain. This dried-up old man, Jing Ting, proposed offering the kingdom's surplus funds to the royal family. But Lihart shut him down. Even though the others grumbled and disapproved, Lihart stood up and ended the meeting, ignoring the man's curses behind him. Just as he entered the meeting room, he learned that there was news about that person. Then let's set off now. His wife of 7 years was dead, but the only one who knew the truth, Duke Qian, was gone. Lihart had to find someone. That was Duke Qian's closest aide. Where did the old man bring Alyssa back from? But the aide claimed to know nothing. He only forged a suitable identity for the madam. But one thing was strange. Duke Qian left him and several knights behind. He entered the Divinewood forest alone. It was said he went to find a sage. Someone from a certain family who had achieved enlightenment and become one with the Divinewood. But the specific reason for the meeting, the aide didn't know. He didn't even know if Duke Qian had met that person. But the day he brought back the unconscious madam, Duke Qian said he found the answer. It sounded like Alyssa. It was the answer the old man had been searching for his whole life. Lihart broke out in a cold sweat, though he didn't know the reason. But there must be a clue in the Divinewood forest. After exchanging a few pleasantries with the aide, he ordered Thompson to investigate all clues in the Divinewood forest. With only a few days left until the founding of the nation, Alyssa helped with preparations at the temple every day. She seemed to have endless energy. Suddenly, she noticed a child. It was none other than little Leon. Holding a small piece of wire, covered in dirt, he squatted there. Upon asking, she learned he was pulling weeds. He looked very confident, but it seemed like he was pulling up flowers. Seeing the little guy so happy, Alyssa was happy too. But you should still go wash up. The little guy suddenly took off running. Not paying attention, he bumped into someone's knee. He fell on his bottom. When she saw who it was, Alyssa had a bad feeling. The person he bumped into was the crown prince, Leon's biological father. Hey kid, didn't anyone at the temple teach you to apologize when you bump into someone? The crown prince's tone was unpleasant. Even if Leon apologized, he would probably be even more annoyed. Donating so much money, how can they raise such a stupid person? Alyssa retorted, Your Highness, you're being too harsh on a child. This gave him the opportunity to mock the Duchess. By the way, can you move? He pointed at the little boy trembling against Alyssa. He said he needed to teach him a lesson. After all, his white clothes were quite expensive. I'm so sorry. Your Highness is so magnanimous. Please forgive this child. Since the Duchess was being so humble, the Crown Prince pretended to drop the matter. But he still muttered something about lowly people, and only stupid parents would raise such a child. Alyssa had never heard anyone insult her like that. But the unaware Leon was stung by his words. Little flames of anger flickered in his hands. My mother isn't stupid. This was the inherited power of the royal family. It was going to be exposed. My sister is 5 months pregnant, but she thinks it's poop. He had just learned that babies grow in bellies. Leon stared with his sixth sense eyes for a long time. Just now, when the Crown Prince called his mother stupid, flames flickered in his palms, wanting to teach him a lesson. His identity was about to be exposed. No, you can't. Alyssa quickly grabbed his hands, not noticing that her own hands were also emitting a similar power, afraid that Leon's identity would be discovered. Fortunately, the Crown Prince was too foolish to notice. He turned and left, hurrying to meet the Pope. They narrowly escaped. What should we do? Did I hurt you? Leon's eyes welled up with tears. But strangely, his hand, which should have been burned, didn't have a single trace of injury. While she was wondering about this, Lihart walked over. Little Leon reached out his small hands and rushed towards him. But then he remembered he was dirty. It's okay. Lihart picked up the little boy. He looked so loving, truly like a father. He wiped the little boy's hands and praised him. It seems Leon is interested in your sister's belly. Is there poop in your sister's belly? The baby in your sister's belly will be sad to hear you say that. Then how do babies come about? How was she supposed to answer that? Alyssa glanced at the equally awkward Lihart, helpless. She vaguely explained that it was from kissing someone you love. Do you like uncle? Of course. I like sister too. If I kiss sister, will we have a baby? Leon was already excitedly wanting to try. Alyssa panicked and quickly shook her head, explaining that it required love. But whether it's love or not, that doesn't seem to matter. Her mature mind raced. Even if there's no liking or love, as long as there's a kiss, there will be a baby. So you can't just kiss anyone. So, sister didn't like uncle before she had a baby. So that's how it is. Alyssa finally managed to muddle through the explanation, unaware that a certain someone, squatting on the ground, felt an indescribable bitterness. Because I would die before kissing someone I don't love. He had a splitting headache. He could only silently apologize. And late at night, the princess. Someone called for the princess, a man so drunk he was staggering. Upon seeing the princess, he immediately began to complain. It turned out he had been slighted by Lihart earlier that day. He wanted to give the emperor the unused budget from the event, but was met with ruthless indifference. Upon hearing this, the princess angrily scolded Lihart and Alyssa, eager to punish the couple. And this opportunity was right in front of her. The butler arrived, mentioning a man had come earlier that day. The man initially didn't want to bother, as this man's business ventures always failed. He was about to go back to sleep with the princess in his arms, but suddenly thought of something. That guy had previously introduced him to something, saying it couldn't be sold because of Lublin. A wicked smile crept across the man's lips. The chance for revenge had come. His wife is pregnant, yet he doesn't know who she is. He thought investigating the Divinewood Forest would provide the answer, but after searching all the nearby villages, not a single blonde, blue-eyed girl had gone missing. He never expected the answer to be right in front of him. Today was the day of the founding ceremony. Although the temple was packed with commoners and nobles, Alyssa still sensed something was amiss. Marquis Devon, standing next to the princess, had brought a dozen knights with him today. Usually, 1 or 2 would suffice for this kind of event, but she didn't think much of it. Inside the vast temple hall, the priest droned on for 2 hours. Not only did she find it boring, but even the others were dozing off. She assumed the play would be equally uneventful. Unexpectedly, it held the secret of her birth. The play depicted the era ruled by demons. The goddess divided her power among 3 children, representing 3 different families. Together, they fought against the demon king and protected the people. Unfortunately, the demon king was too powerful, and the 3 family heads began to falter. Fortunately, the royal family, inheriting the power of the Crimson Flame, arrived in time. Together, they defeated the demon king and saved the world. But not long after, the demons trapped in the contaminated land regained their power. The blonde family head, for the love of the first emperor, sacrificed himself and created a purification lake in the contaminated land. Alyssa never believed this fabricated history. After all, history is always written by the victors. But when she heard about the purification lake, her nerves were instantly touched. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably, as if that deceased person had a profound connection to her. It's okay, it's just a play. Lihart's comforting words had barely left his lips. When the play became reality, a horde of monsters suddenly burst into the temple, and a large wave was approaching. Everyone panicked and fled. Lihart held his wife tightly, about to escape, when his subordinate reported they were outnumbered. Their only option was to hide quickly. They quickly retreated to a safe area. But the number of holy knights here was simply too few. Seeing the commoner children being attacked by the monsters, Alyssa feared they would lose their lives if this continued. Alyssa tugged at Lihart. Go save those people. She was near tears. But Lihart only cared about his safety. He really didn't want to watch those children die before his eyes. While Lihart hesitated, his subordinate reassured him, Don't worry, we will protect the Duchess with our lives. Lihart finally made up his mind. With a gust of wind, he reluctantly let go of his wife's hand. Alyssa, I'll be right back. The thought of his wife dying in someone else's arms was unbearable. The man was driven to the brink. Just a moment ago, he could only kill one monster with a single blow. Now, with a simple raise of his hand, he instantly wiped out all the monsters. When his wife asked him to save the others, Lihart was reluctant. But seeing two commoner children about to die, he finally and reluctantly released his wife's hand. With just one strike, the ferocious bird let out a blood-curdling shriek. Although these monsters weren't difficult to deal with, he still felt something was amiss. These kinds of washed-up monsters usually didn't leave the forest. But now, not only were they in the city attacking people, but there were also quite a few of them. In a brief moment of distraction, a large bird swooped down towards Alyssa. Although it was killed instantly by Thompson with a single slash, another one lunged forward. That force, if it hit Alyssa at 300 miles per hour, would be devastating. She looked like a chicken waiting to be slaughtered. There was no other choice. Thompson had to use his own body to shield the Duchess. A scream rang out, and Lihart instantly felt a sense of dread. When he turned his head, he saw the scene before him. No, this couldn't happen. As if possessed, a woman with long, dark silver hair suddenly appeared in his mind. The woman seemed to be disappearing, but a dark shadow reached out, pleading, Please don't go. His outstretched hand mirrored the shadow's movement in his mind. Suddenly, a captivating black aura emanated from him. Calling Alyssa's name, he swiftly unleashed a deadly black energy from his palm. Almost simultaneously, all the monsters plummeted to the ground. Alyssa was stunned. How could all the monsters suddenly be dead? Looking up, she saw her husband falling towards her, enveloped in black aura. Although she didn't understand what the black aura was, it seemed to be consuming her husband bit by bit. This couldn't continue. Thinking this, she embraced her husband tightly. Lihart, wake up. A dazzling light suddenly emanated from her hands, but no one noticed. Her anxious tears fell one by one. Fortunately, her husband only seemed a little dizzy, but she was still worried. You killed all the monsters, but you're surrounded by a dark aura. Sensing his wife's unease, Lihart gave her a warm embrace. I'm really all right now, but the Emperor had a serious issue. He still hadn't figured out how the monsters had gotten in, especially during the founding ceremony. As Emperor, how could he not have made arrangements for such an important day? He had a terrible headache, but he didn't notice the person smirking beside him. He even foolishly thanked the other person. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have returned safely. This Marquis, Devon, while verbally expressing concern for the people's safety, his eyes signaled to the princess that it was her turn. I heard my uncle developed a new perfume, and its scent can repel monsters. Devon pretended to have just remembered. He went on to describe the perfume's compact size and life-saving properties. The Emperor, having just experienced a brush with death, immediately decided to mass-produce it. The triumphant Devon wouldn't stop there. Someone had to be held responsible for what happened today. The security around the imperial capital was always Duke Lublin's responsibility. Although the Emperor wasn't very bright, he excelled at stirring up trouble, especially when it came to undermining Lublin. The Emperor praised Marquis Devon, saying his idea was good. He ordered Duke Lublin to attack tomorrow. That villainous look on his face made one want to punch him. Alyssa was nearly in tears, but Lihart had to leave. The dark aura that had suddenly surrounded him earlier worried and frightened Alyssa. Yet, her husband had to stay behind at the temple alone to prevent further monster attacks. The entire temple was now protected by a barrier cast by the Pope. Lihart understood that staying wouldn't accomplish much. The couple embraced, reluctant to part. The Pope watched them with knowing eyes, but remained silent. Now, he had to heal Lihart. As soon as the Pope's healing power touched him, Lihart cried out in pain. Wisps of dark energy emanated from his body. The Pope was stunned. What was going on? Pulling up a chair, he questioned Lihart. Lihart explained that he had visited the contaminated canyon 3 months prior and might have been tainted there. But the Pope knew it was a malevolent energy and not an ordinary one. It was identical to the one he had sensed before. Worse, this dark energy had seeped into the cracks of Lihart's soul. If he used his victory evolution, he would experience the same agonizing pain. Even as the Pope, he couldn't purify it while maintaining the barrier. So, they would have to schedule another session. However, he had already purified a portion of it. There shouldn't be any major issues for the time being. but to avoid another outburst like earlier. It would be best to keep his distance from his wife. After Lihart left, the Pope pondered. He recognized the power the Duchess had used. It was the unique holy power of his own family. But Alyssa's family had no connection to the Celts. Yet, that power was unmistakable. Perhaps she was a distant relative of the Celts. That was the only explanation he could think of. But why did it make him think of his deceased wife? He remembered when his wife was found. She was less than 7 months pregnant. The doctor had said there was no hope for the child's survival. Yet, he had followed his wife's trail, hoping for a miracle. He had only found the child's tombstone, but no body. After all these years, he still clung to the hope that his child was alive. He felt like a fool. Back home, Alyssa had recovered. She knew someone was behind the monster attack. And Lihart was the target. Fortunately, it had been less than a day since the incident. She rang the bell. She needed to assemble an investigation team to go to the forest immediately. Just then, Annie rushed into the room, calling for her. She had bought something that was supposed to repel monsters. Although the item was delicate and small, it seemed like a useless trinket. Alyssa saw through the charade instantly. But then she noticed the royal insignia on the bottom of the perfume bottle. She was so angry she could only laugh. Someone was selling this on the very day monsters attacked the capital. She felt insulted. Just then, her aide arrived. She couldn't wait any longer. She ordered him to immediately organize an investigation team to be dispatched to the forest. Though they were husband and wife, they couldn't see each other. Alyssa felt empty and lonely. She snuck to the tower where her husband was staying alone in the middle of the night and broke a window with a stone. But there was exceptionally good news today. Lihart was being sued. The emperor was furious and wanted to hold him accountable. After all, Lihart was responsible for the capital's security. You have betrayed my trust. Your negligence caused this tragedy. The emperor's posture suggested Lihart would have to pay a heavy price. But please wait a moment. Lihart calmly raised his hand. A subordinate brought him something he had prepared beforehand. 2 unremarkable longevity pills. What did they have to do with anything? Of course it's related. Gallstones that should have been in the forest were found in the temple garden. It's obvious that this monster attack on the temple was deliberately planned. And currently, only one person has benefited, the perfume seller, Ziju. It's obvious, without even thinking, that Ziju attracted the monsters and then sold his own monster repellent. Everyone murmured. Wasn't it Marquis Devon who thought it was a good idea? Devon hadn't expected to be exposed so quickly, but he still refused to admit defeat. He angrily accused Lihart of slander. What could 2 gallstones prove? But Lihart's next words shut him up completely. It turns out that the day before the founding of the nation, the Viscount rented a large number of carriages. Just by examining the composition of the mud on the wheels, we can tell that the Viscount went to that forest. This is just a coincidence. Duke, aren't you going too far? Lihart smirked. He had investigated and found that Ziju was deeply in debt from his inventions. Yet, right after the founding of the nation by Marquis Devon, he suddenly had the money to rent carriages. But the Viscount still struggled to defend himself. So Lihart played his final card, the captured Viscount Majeda. At the same time, an account book was handed to the emperor. It contained all the transactions between the Viscount and the Marquis. The emperor only had to ask casually. And the Viscount, terrified, knelt down and confessed everything. It was me. I carelessly fell into the villain's trap. You're slandering me. The Marquis shifted all the blame onto his uncle. This son-in-law was truly unreliable. The emperor was furious. But he had to give everyone an explanation. He only made the Marquis compensate for the losses. Lihart objected. But no commoners were injured this time, were they? The emperor suddenly wanted to act like a benevolent ruler and announced he would be lenient with the Marquis. Lihart was stunned by these words. Those dozen dead commoners. Weren't they driven away by the royal family because of their social status? He accused the Marquis of threatening His Majesty's life and even slapped him with a charge of rebellion. As for how many commoners died or were injured, the emperor didn't care. He was so angry he wanted to hit someone. Yet, he had to praise the Duke for his valid points, since everyone agreed with him. So, Marquis Devon's title was revoked, and he divorced the princess. The news became a trending topic that very day. But Alyssa wasn't happy. She was left alone in her room, while her husband was studying handwriting somewhere else. She still hadn't found any information about the dark energy. It was infuriating. What if she gave birth and he couldn't even see the baby? Just as she was thinking this, Alyssa's window was smashed. When she learned the truth, she was completely dumbfounded. The Pope, single for 20 years, was her biological father. It turned out that after seeing the Duchess use blue divine power, the Pope became suspicious, because that was a power unique to the Sertilert family. He asked a friend to find a paternity test kit. A simple test would reveal the answer. But he hesitated, afraid his hopes would be dashed. But regardless of who the Duchess was, as long as she inherited the family's power, he had a responsibility to find out its source. He placed a strand of golden hair he had managed to collect into a clear glass. He intended to start with a crab to confirm, but somehow, he impulsively pulled out one of his own hairs. As long as they were closely related, the nature of their magic would be similar. If the potion turned blue after being applied, they were related. Otherwise, it would solidify. He thought it would solidify immediately. But the next second, he was stunned. The potion turned a snowy blue. He couldn't believe the result. The Duchess was actually his daughter. The jet-black golden hair, those deep blue-green eyes, were exactly as his wife had described. Half like me, half like you. And we'll both love him very much, right? But his wife had died, and his daughter had disappeared without a trace. He completely broke down at this moment of reunion. All the guilt and longing transformed into tears of joy. His wife's wish had truly come true, and Alyssa soon learned the truth as well. Ever since Lihart had been corrupted by demonic energy, he had confined himself to the tower. Because she missed him so much, Alyssa secretly snuck in and broke the tower window in the middle of the night. Seeing his wife and their baby down below, Lihart thought something serious had happened. Unexpectedly, she took out a notebook and asked if he was bored or if there was anything he needed. He shook his head, lying. Although he wasn't a fussy person, not seeing his wife every day was indeed inconvenient. I'll get you out of here soon. Just bear with it a little longer. Seeing his wife's silent encouragement, he realized she had come to lift his spirits. He smiled indulgently. After all, being stuck there was truly difficult, and he hadn't found any useful clues. Then, his wife held up the notebook again. I miss you so much. Our little one misses Daddy too. These were the words Alyssa truly wanted to say. Lihart was silent for a few seconds. Then, a paper airplane flew down. I miss you both too. It even had a drawing of a dog with a pitiful expression. Alyssa instantly felt it was all worth it. Seeing him from afar like this wasn't so bad. But how could it compare to being with him? The next day, Lihart went to the temple for treatment. No matter how worried her husband was, worried that it would be hard on her being pregnant, it didn't matter. She insisted on waiting for him at the temple. As husband and wife, they had to be inseparable. Lihart smiled helplessly and went to the treatment room with the Pope. The treatment ended quickly. The pain in his shoulder was gradually subsiding. But for some reason, the Pope seemed particularly displeased with him today. With a stern face, he scolded him for neglecting his health, and then blamed him for worrying his family. He even lectured him about the importance of participating in prenatal care. He thought it might be his imagination. He had been looking forward to finally spending some quality time with his wife, but before they could exchange a few words, the Pope spoke again. Duchess, could you come with me for a walk? Although Lihart was reluctant, he agreed. Watching the affectionate couple, the Pope didn't know what to say. He led Alyssa to a secluded garden. Madam, how much do you know about divine power? Alyssa thought carefully. She knew it was the power of the Theralt family, and that only members of the Theralt family could inherit it. The Pope understood. Looking at the withered flowers, he said, please extend your hand and imagine watering them. Alyssa didn't understand, but she closed her eyes and silently thought, I want to water these flowers. Unexpectedly, a blue power emanated from her hands, and water flowed out. This is the divine power that can purify all dangerous auras. Although you've used it unconsciously a few times before, this is the first time you've noticed it. Does this power have anything to do with you? He wasn't quite sure. The Pope longed to embrace his daughter, but he restrained himself. If your real family were still alive, could you accept that fact? Alyssa recoiled in shock. Was the Pope truly her father? The truth she had been seeking finally revealed itself. Everything she thought she knew about the story was wrong. The family she thought the original Alyssa had grown up with had nothing to do with her. Alyssa couldn't believe it. The original Alyssa was an imposter, and Lihart had known this secret all along. When Alyssa heard that the Pope was her father, she didn't know whether to be sad or happy. After all, she was just an outsider who didn't belong here. Fortunately, the Pope was a very gentle father. He didn't pressure her for an answer. He only hoped she would visit the temple often, just like usual. Watching the Pope cautiously leave, Alyssa felt a strange unease. She couldn't even focus on Lihart reading a story to their child. What's wrong, Alyssa? Lihart asked worriedly. What did the Pope talk to you about? Tell me, she said. He told me the Pope is my father, and that I also have divine power, so I don't need to worry about being corrupted by demonic energy. She expected Lihart to be surprised, and he was, for a few seconds. Lihart already knew some of it. Ansel had approached him before, telling him about the photo he found while renovating the villa, and what the doctor had said. The real Alyssa had died at the age of 8. Lihart felt guilty. He had hidden the truth, afraid of the blow it would deal her. And her grandfather, the redwood forest where he'd brought her from. Lihart had sent people to investigate. There wasn't a single trace of Alyssa ever having lived there. So the question remained, where had she lived before the age of 12? As Alyssa pondered this, Lihart asked how she felt about finding her biological father. She froze. She didn't know how she felt. Her previous life's memories of parents were only of coldness and hurt. Her parents were a shadow over her childhood. She didn't understand parental love. And yet, this flawed person now had a father. A kind, powerful, and respected father. Her heart was in turmoil, but she knew he was a good man. She wanted to get closer, to understand him better. It was a strange, new feeling. "Let's visit father-in-law tomorrow," she said, nestled in Lihart's warm embrace. Her anxiety and confusion dissipated. She felt happy in this moment. As if sensing her thoughts, the Pope kept peeking at the temple entrance early the next morning. His subordinates noticed he was waiting for someone, and he awkwardly tried to escape. Just as he turned, he heard the announcement of Duchess Lublin's arrival. His face lit up with joy, but when they actually sat down to talk, both of them were awkwardly silent, occasionally stealing glances at each other. They really were alike, Lihart thought, amused. He broke the silence, calling the Pope father-in-law and apologizing for not visiting yesterday. The Pope finally spoke, embarrassed, blaming himself for being too abrupt. He should be thanking them for visiting. But he was more concerned about the Duchess. "How have you been all these years?" he asked. Alyssa's expression turned comical with shock. The formal Duchess in you. She wasn't used to her father being so polite. Saying father felt awkward. But what if she hurt his feelings? As she lowered her head, unsure what to do. Her father told her not to worry about it. "It's just a title. Don't feel pressured. You can call me whatever you like." He was so kind. She had never experienced such tenderness. But she didn't remember anything before the age of 12. And the book didn't describe it either. She only knew she'd been in a carriage accident as a child. And when she woke up, she was in Duke Lublin's city. Then she married Lihart. And now they lived a shameless life together. The couple exchanged a sweet look. The Pope listened, startled. A carriage accident. But it might not be true, Lihart thought. He'd explain everything later, after he'd sorted it out. After all, only he and Duke Lublin knew the truth about Alyssa's origins. It was complicated. Thankfully, Alyssa was doing well now. The Pope's face was filled with relief. "Thank you for being alive and well," he said, his hands trembling. Alyssa saw it clearly. She stammered and hesitated for a long moment. Finally, she responded, "It's good to see you too, though it was a little late." She smiled shyly, and the Pope froze again. He thought he saw his deceased wife. "We will love her very much." He thought his wife was right when she said he could do anything for his child. He felt exactly that way now. He felt like conquering the world for his daughter. He couldn't believe it. This handsome man with jet black hair dared to grope his maid in public. But he was even more shocked that this man was his brother. After the father and daughter reunited, the Pope bought this gold leaf and pearl hair clip as a first gift for his daughter. But he worried it might put pressure on her. He decided to think it over and left the gift on his desk before going out. Little Leon came looking for him the next moment. He was dressed like a little gardener. He wanted to show the Pope his flower bed, but no one was in the office. However, he was quickly attracted by the golden hair clip on the desk. The green leaves had white beads on them. It was so beautiful. His sister had told him they were flower seeds. He thought if he planted them in the soil, more would grow. Little Leon was instantly energized. He wanted to grow many, many flowers for the Holy Father. He was so happy at that moment, only to be crying his eyes out the next. The Pope went out for a walk and changed his mind. Whether his daughter liked it or not, he had to give it to her first to find out. But as soon as he entered, he saw this scene. The hair clip only had leaves left, no pearls. Seeing little Leon running towards him with his eyes wide open, he guessed it was this little guy. Hearing that the pearls had been planted in the flower bed, he was dumbfounded. He had never been so speechless in his life. Alyssa arrived at the temple at this moment. Little Leon had told her he would be decorating the flower bed today, but she couldn't find him after searching for a long time. She didn't expect him to be hiding inside. The moment he saw her, the little guy, who had been holding back his tears, burst out crying uncontrollably. She thought something serious had happened. But it turned out the little guy had ruined the gift his father had given him. The Pope exclaimed that raising children was truly difficult. He had just explained to little Leon that it was a hair clip, not flower seeds. But as soon as he heard it was a gift for Alyssa, little Leon started wailing. His subordinates came to him with something at that moment. Now that he was finally free, he had to go back and comfort him. He opened the door to find little Leon beaming with joy and excitement. But what surprised him even more was that Alyssa was already wearing the hair clip. "Leon and I fixed it. Does it suit me? Thank you for the gift, Father. I love it." The Pope was stunned. All his previous worries vanished. Alyssa, experiencing a father's love for the first time, kept touching the hair clip on her head, watching the happy father and daughter on the street. She thought she should give a gift in return. With that in mind, she and Annie went to a boutique, wanting to choose a men's brooch. With her VIP status as a duchess, she naturally went to a private room to browse. She let Annie wander around on her own. Unexpectedly, something happened. After accidentally stepping on her skirt, Annie was about to fall flat on her face. but was thankfully caught by a pair of large hands around her waist. "Miss, are you all right?" It was a handsome gentleman. Just as she was about to thank him, she felt an inappropriate touch on her waist. She instantly realized something was wrong. The gentleman now had a wicked smile on his face. While speaking words of concern, his hands didn't stop. Annie, a young girl, was terrified. She stammered, unable to speak. "Let go of her." Alyssa appeared just in time, scolding the shameless man for daring to touch a girl inappropriately. Hearing the word groping, the prideful blonde man became flustered. He insisted he was only checking her body and that if she didn't like it, she was being violent. The blonde man hadn't expected this woman to be so tall. He had just wanted to flirt with a girl, but now his plan was ruined. He saw the little maid cowering in fear. "Did I do anything to make you unhappy?" He was certain the little maid was too scared to speak. As long as she remained silent, he could get away with it. And Annie truly was terrified, so much so that it was difficult for her to utter a single word. Unexpectedly, the next moment, Alyssa's voice boomed. "I don't want to be touched by you, you pervert." The blonde man became the center of everyone's attention. Alyssa explained the situation to the shop assistants who rushed over. The blonde man was furious. He felt humiliated to be called a pervert. To his surprise, the shop assistant stopped him and asked him to leave. He was dumbfounded. It turned out this woman had a higher social standing than him. He could only leave angrily. Seeing Annie crying her eyes out, Alyssa only wanted to know which family that man belonged to. The shop assistant answered nervously, "That is the next head of the Serrell family." Alyssa was stunned. "That scum is my cousin. Here we go again. They've been married for 7 years, and finally blah blah blah." Unexpectedly, a new conspiracy arises. After Annie was harassed by that blonde man, Alyssa asked her father about him. But her father described him as a capable and obedient young man. If it weren't for yesterday's incident, she would have believed him. That kind of person is either a capable scum or a skilled manipulator. She decided to go back and investigate further. Unexpectedly, she looked up and was captivated by someone. Lihart was with little Leon. His serious and handsome profile was so adorable. Alyssa couldn't help but smile. "It seems you like him very much. Father said that when you look at someone you like, you radiate happiness." Her father, like the Marchioness, saw right through her heart. Looking at Lihart, she finally understood. She truly liked Lihart. If she wasn't sure before, she was now crystal clear. It was a strong sense of peace. "Alyssa, why is your face so red?" Her husband's voice brought her back from her reverie. Afraid of being seen through, she turned and fled. Lihart was left bewildered. Did I do something wrong? After receiving a hint from his father-in-law, he hurriedly chased after her. Their figures, one after the other, disappeared. "It's good to be young," the Pope remarked. Unexpectedly, that night, Alyssa tried to send her husband away. Lihart was confused again. "Can I sleep on the sofa?" "No, you have to go to another room." Because if she didn't, she really wouldn't be able to resist devouring him. She couldn't imagine how wild she would become. But Lihart, with a pitiful expression, wanted her to read him a bedtime story first. He was wearing clothes even more alluring than usual. She blushed again and firmly refused. "If I upset you, I apologize, okay?" Lihart's pitiful appearance was incredibly tempting. She hesitated for 2 seconds. "Fine, let's sleep together." Watching her husband quickly make the bed, she kept telling herself that he was her husband, so even if he did that, it would be okay, right? The passion in her heart could no longer be suppressed. She stood on tiptoe and cupped his face in her hands. You definitely wouldn't want to see what happened next. So, let's fast forward to the next morning. Lihart was filled with anxiety. Because of the baby, he had been very careful. He was worried and preoccupied, but at breakfast, he was dumbfounded. His wife told him to nourish his body, with a strange, suggestive expression. He instantly understood what she meant. She thought he wasn't good enough. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. So, as soon as his wife finished eating, he scooped her up into his arms. "I need to clear up this misunderstanding with my wife. This dangerous atmosphere. Alyssa really loves it." But the sweet days quickly passed. He went to the temple, as usual today. Unexpectedly, people looked at him strangely. They even started whispering in front of him. He asked little Leon and found out that someone was spreading a rumor that he had an inappropriate relationship with the Pope. He couldn't believe such an absurd rumor existed. His father wanted to talk to him, but little Leon stopped him. "Do you want the rumors to get even worse?" The woman, showing her true strength for the first time, successfully stunned everyone. No one could believe the rumors. The one who was rumored to be involved with the old man of the temple had become the next head of the Serrell family. As the ugly rumors spread throughout the empire, the Pope was filled with self-blame and guilt. Although reluctant, his daughter was pregnant. So, it's best she doesn't come to the temple anymore. Just as the two women were reluctantly parting, Lihart appeared. He had gone to the imperial palace today, but now he was here. This meant the rumor had reached the palace as well. Alyssa felt very responsible. But Lihart didn't care at all, and he had a good solution. looking at his stunned father-in-law. Do you trust me? At the Crown Prince's birthday party in a week. The blonde man was the center of attention at the party. As the next head of the Seralt family, his presence at the royal banquet surprised everyone. It was said that the temple and the royal family were estranged. The head of the Seralt family, especially after becoming pope, had never participated in royal events. After all, that incident happened 20 years ago. But since Cain was here, it meant the Seralt family had decided to get closer to the royal family. The attention pleased Cain. He had deliberately antagonized the royal family before. It was to gain the trust of the current head of the family. But now, Aiden was involved in a scandal with Alyssa, causing the family to doubt the current head's competence. So Cain was busy consolidating his position. He had approached the Crown Prince a week ago. As long as the Crown Prince supported him, he would bring down Aiden within the family. That was why he received the invitation to the banquet. He thought that since the current head didn't manage family affairs much, the Seralt family was his for the taking. Unexpectedly, a commotion arose. Duke Lubin and his wife made a grand entrance. Alyssa wasn't hiding at home. She was chatting animatedly with other women. This shameless woman. Cain decided to make his presence felt. Duchess, we meet again. He was polite and gentlemanly. Alyssa pretended not to remember. Oh, you're the man who harassed my maid at the jewelry store. That was just a misunderstanding. But I saw it with my own 2 eyes. You clearly harassed my maid. Murmurs arose from the surrounding people. Cain didn't expect this woman to be so crazy. He still wanted to morally guilt-trip her to salvage his reputation. It's not good for your maid to keep bringing this up, is it? Alyssa didn't understand. Why should the victim hide when you're the one who did wrong? With a few words, Cain became the center of attention again, just as he was racking his brains for a comeback. The royal family made their formal entrance. He decided not to provoke the vicious woman any further. After all, he had more important things to do. He didn't know that Alyssa would take everything from him. The nobles came forward one by one to present their birthday gifts. The next one was the Seralt family's turn. But at this crucial moment, a subordinate delivered a letter from Pope Aiden. The emperor intended to read it after the banquet. But the letter was about the heir. He was stunned when he saw the contents. Aiden, from this day forth, I strip Cain of his position as heir, and I appoint my daughter, Alyssa Lubin, as the next head of the family. The emperor's expression caught everyone's attention. Under their questioning gazes, Alyssa strode forward and curtsied politely and elegantly. I, Alyssa Seralt, formally greet your majesty. The entire banquet erupted. He's the disgrace of the Seralt family, or rather, the emperor's illegitimate daughter. No, this is impossible. Cain completely broke down. How can the woman rumored to have a scandal with the Pope become the next head of the Seralt family? How dare you deceive the emperor? Just then, a ball of water gathered in Alyssa's palm and grew larger and larger. He was dumbfounded. This is the true Seralt divine power. Alyssa confidently crushed the water ball. As a direct descendant of the family, I have naturally inherited the family's power. The true heir to the head of the family has appeared. Some people went mad. The emperor was furious, practically suffering internal injuries. Seeing her plan succeed, Alyssa smiled triumphantly and elegantly excused herself. The blonde man suppressed his rage. He needed to see the Pope immediately to get some answers. That crazy girl dared to steal his Seralt inheritance. He had to make her pay dearly. However, he was stopped by soldiers outside the temple. He yelled and screamed, trying to use his status as heir to force his way in. But unfortunately, the soldiers had already received notification. The next head of the family had changed. Unwilling to accept this, he continued to act shamelessly, insisting on entering the temple. The Pope appeared at that moment, his expression filled with disappointment. Cain clung to the last shred of hope. The absurd events at the banquet today couldn't be true, could they? He thought the head of the family had chosen to do this to cover up some hatred. But it was all true. I have revoked your heirship. The Pope spoke with some self-reproach. Yes, he shouldn't have entrusted the position of family head to such an incompetent person. With his last hope shattered, Cain couldn't accept it. His entire upbringing had been focused on becoming the head of the family, so how could he willingly let it go? But the position of family head cannot be given to someone like you. Alyssa appeared at that moment. Because of the incident at the jewelry store, she had investigated Cain's actions over the years. The residents of the territory spoke highly of Cain, and it was said that he was also quite capable in handling affairs. Cain was devastated. While Alyssa was playing princess games, he had already become independent and capable. He didn't know that Alyssa knew more than just the surface. In reality, Cain was a complete scoundrel. Not only the residents of his own territory, but women from other territories had also suffered at his hands. Although he appeared to be a talented and handsome young man, he had committed countless misdeeds. But Cain didn't think it was a big deal. It was just toying with a few women. He poked Alyssa's shoulder. While I was managing the territory, you were still at the Duke's mansion, wearing pretty dresses and eating sweet cookies. A duchess with a mere sense of justice cannot save the people. Lihart wanted to step forward and intervene, but Alyssa stopped him. He sighed helplessly, too tired to explain how capable she truly was. Her expression suddenly darkened. Just watch how my mere sense of justice saves the people. Her arrogant and defiant attitude provoked Cain to raise his hand. Cursing, he was about to slap her, but Lihart snapped his fingers, and Cain was swept up into the air by a gust of wind. He performed an involuntary acrobatic display before crashing unceremoniously into a flower bed. Thompson, throw him back to the Marquis's mansion. Following Lihart's order, two knights enthusiastically dragged the struggling Cain away. Alyssa, are you all right? Her father was extremely dejected, blaming himself for neglecting the family and for his poor judgment. But it's not your fault that others abuse their power. Before Alyssa could finish comforting her father, she heard Lihart call her name. Looking up, she saw the Marchioness. Judging by her demeanor, Alyssa thought she was looking for a fight. But in the next second, the Marchioness rushed forward and embraced her. The Marchioness was overjoyed. She finally understood why Alyssa reminded her of Yulia. Thank you for being alive, my child. The vicious emperor finally lost it after learning the truth. He thought she was the daughter of a rural baron. But she turned out to be the Pope's only blood relative. She even inherited the divine power. And she married into the Lublin family, becoming its mistress. The combined power of wind and water. The emperor sensed a threat. Reamer, what do you think about that prophecy? Remember what the prophecy said. Prophecies exist to change the future. Hearing Reamer's words, he fell into deep thought. If he wanted to stop the prophecy from happening, perhaps a new future would emerge. Reamer said he would find a way. This reassured the emperor. But he didn't know to whom Reamer's loyalty truly belonged. The plan was going smoothly, but then a girl suddenly appeared. Could it be that the royal power hasn't fully recovered? He had a premonition that the girl would ruin everything. Careless. To regain all of the royal power, he had to eliminate her. Meanwhile, the young couple was still unaware of the impending storm. Although Alyssa lost her mother, she gained the Marchioness, who had royal blood, and who immediately acknowledged her as her daughter. She even blamed Aiden for telling her too late. Fortunately, the outcome was happy and sweet. Alyssa soon arrived at the Seralt family estate. Her father warmly welcomed her. Everyone in the family respectfully bowed to her. Although they addressed her as the future head of the family, her sharp green eyes keenly noticed that they were all wary of her. It turned out that after her identity was revealed, her father, for Cain's sake, not only personally handled the matters, but also gave Cain time to leave. But Cain couldn't appreciate this kindness and stubbornly refused to leave the Seralt estate. In the end, he could only be expelled. The family members didn't understand what had happened, but they didn't want to have anything to do with Alyssa, the culprit, let alone accept her as the head of the family. After all, in their eyes, the perfectly good heir, Cain, had been driven away by the wicked Alyssa. Just as she was feeling speechless, the butler unexpectedly stepped forward to welcome her. Head of the family, I am the butler, Frederick. As expected of a seasoned butler, Alyssa admired him. He could have easily remained uninvolved, but to determine whether she was qualified to be the head of the Seralt family, he chose to approach her. This showed that the butler wasn't a servant to any particular individual, but was devoted to the entire family. Such a person must be won over. Soon, she had an opportunity to demonstrate her abilities. The head maid, who had been a devoted fan of her mother, thoughtfully prepared afternoon tea, hearing from her father that these pastries were her mother's favorites. She couldn't help but feel touched. She had thought the head maid was taciturn, but she turned out to be so considerate. The butler then delivered a letter. It was a protest from Count Vicenna, threatening to sever trade between their territories and bring back the residents who had been taken from his lands. Before her father finished reading the letter, Alyssa instinctively voiced her thoughts. Vicenna is a county whose mountains connect to the Seralt territory. As far as I know, that count has long been charging a toll on the road leading to the Marquis' territory. But a few years ago, we jointly suppressed bandits and gave him a 50% reduction on the toll, didn't we? Count Vicenna is notoriously stingy, so he's unwilling to increase protection fees. That's why his residents are leaving. And now he wants to extort the Seralt family. Although the count is at fault, it's the people who ultimately suffer. Having the toll may seem like a loss for the Seralt family, but in the long run, it will not only increase trade between the two territories, but also bring more profit to the Seralt family through increased trade volume. With increased trade, the loss from the reduced toll can be offset. We can even eliminate the troublesome bandits. She spoke with such passion that her father stared at her in astonishment. Even the seasoned butler exclaimed, "Oh my God, I didn't expect her to be so insightful." Seeing their expressions, she thought, did I go too far? She felt apprehensive. After all, she wasn't officially the head of the family yet.